It's an honor for me to be here with you in your home in Fort Worth, or near Fort Worth, Westlake, Texas, and to talk about your career and your life in railroads. I think it's appropriate to be in a place where the password is railroad to get into Wi-Fi. And so I think that sets the stage really nicely. And what I want to do is talk for a couple of hours with you about a lot of subjects and places and people and events that have shaped your life, but also that you have had an influence. And so I think it's best to start at the beginning and talk about Mendota. Am I pronouncing that right?
Correctly.
Yeah, Mendota, Illinois, and talk a little bit about what it was like growing up there, and some of the people who influenced you, maybe some of the events or things you did that influenced you. So, well, what should we know about Mendota if we never have been there?
Yeah, well, it's home of the Sweet Corn Festival.
Okay.
It's a small northern Illinois town, about 7,000 population, and of course the area I grew up in, your parents let you out in the morning and came back for lunch and dinner, and that was it. You're on your own. And so I had a lot of good experiences, I think, that helped shape things. Somehow I was interested in selling stuff, so I would have, I'd sell chicken eggs, and I would sell pop stands, and a little bit older, and I'd have paper routes, and I'd mow lawns, and it's always self-sufficient, I learned a lot from all of those experiences. And then in high school, I worked at a gas station. Went right to the gas station after school and worked till 10 p.m. I closed it up. So, as I'm 15 years old, I'm driving a tow truck, picking up accidents, and that was, really learned a lot there. So it was right next to the railroad track, and there was an operator, a telegrapher operator, that worked the second shift in an interlocking tower right behind the gas station where the Burlington crossed the Illinois Central and the Milwaukee. Okay. And he'd come down and buy a bottle of Coke and candy bar right before I closed at 10. So when I was a senior in high school, at the end of my first semester in the wintertime, he said, "What are you going to do this summer?" I said, "Well, I'm going to work here at the gas station." "How much do you make?" I said, 65 cents an hour. He said, "How would you like to make $2.02 an hour?" And I couldn't believe there'd be so much money in the world with $2.02 an hour. So he said, "Tell you what, when you get off work here at 10, come on up, and between 10 and midnight, when I'm relieved, I will teach you how to be a telegrapher and an operator." Wow. And so I did that, and I'll never forget my very first night. I sat up there with him at 10:05. Yes. And the yard line rang, and of course there were all kinds of phone connections and jacks and those scissor microphone kind of things, And he said, "Go ahead and answer the phone. It's the yard line." And so I answered the phone. I had no idea what the guy on the other end said, and the guy hung up. And so he said, "Well, who was it?" I said, "I don't know." "Well, what do you want?" "Something about some farm animals." I said, "I remember you mentioned a goat." And then the goat wanted to do something in a pot. Oh, he said, maybe he said the goat wants the pot for the transfer to make a double. Does that sound right? "I think so." "Well, here's what you do. You go over there and throw in 54, the lever, pull out 55, pull out 54 again, and then pull 60 lever, which is a signal, the pot signal." And that was my very first experience, and then it went on like that. Well,
just doubling back a little, growing up before you got into high school.
Yeah.
But I think that's a great story, and a great way to get started in the industry is just solve a problem as it happens.
Right.
Who were some of the? Were you in a large family? Did you? How many siblings did you have?
There were 5 of us, and I was the second from the last. The 3 older ones were girls, and the younger one was a girl. So I was the only boy.
I see.
according to them, very spoiled.
Did you, were any of your immediate family, or did you have extended family in the town?
No, my parents were raised in Alexis, Illinois, about 100 miles away.
I see.
And we were the first ones. My dad was a banker, and so he, would go from bank to bank.
I see.
But that was his last bank.
Yeah.
There.
So were there any people, either immediate family or teachers or anyone that you would consider a role model or a great influence on you before, as you were growing up in Mendota?
Oh, well, of course, obviously my parents, both my mother and father, each for different reasons, provided a lot of ideas on leadership and that sort of thing. And when I would have problems with my paper route or with the lawn or with collecting money or something, my dad would give me advice about what to say and how to approach it. And so a lot of interaction there that way, all very positive.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that they let me do what I wanted to do just gave me a great degree of independence.
Any childhood friends from Mendota that you stayed connected with?
All of them.
Really?
Oh yeah, I still do.
Well, and they still live in that area? Or
No, they all
they've dispersed?
Dispersed, but I probably have, 5 or 6 that I'm in constant contact with, now.
Who are neighbors of yours? And
Well, it's a small town, everybody's a neighbor.
Yeah.
Classmates.
Yeah.
And Facebook and email has really helped a lot.
I see. Rediscovered them.
Well, I didn't rediscover them.
Stayed in touch.
Made the contact much easier.
Mm-hmm.
And, but yeah, we're going back for high school reunions. It's like where we left off.
Wow.
I had a very successful class. My classmates, many of them have done extremely well in life. And so, it's been fun staying. I'll tell you a funny story in that regard. When I was in marketing, I had an opportunity to go to Detroit, where we were going to call on Ford and General Motors and Chrysler. And we had a new technology we wanted to try with them by robotically loading new automobiles into a trailer. So we had them come in one company at a time, but we didn't dare mix the companies together.
Mm-hmm.
A company from Ford came in. And so when Ford came, we each peeled off an executive. I picked off this one guy. Gave him the whole spiel about what we're doing, gave him a demonstration, and as we're leaving, I said, "Can I have your business card?" He said, "Sure," he gave it to me. I gave him mine, and we're both standing looking at the business card. And I looked at him and said, "I went to high school with the Norman Ailers." "Really?" He said, "I went to high school with the Bill Greenwood." And I know we're looking at each other, that old SOB can't be him, So I said, "Well, that Norman Ailers set a record for throwing the javelin in high school, and that record still stands." He said, "Well, that would be me." Anyway, and then another classmate was the head of marketing for General Motors at the same time. So
you all went into transportation in slightly different ways.
Yes, different ways, engineering, etc.
How often did the train come through Mendota? Was it a frequent event?
All the time. There was never a time growing up when no air conditioning, your windows were open, you heard trains. You heard switching of trains, because there was a yard in Mendota. So you heard the switching with the cars, making couplings, making a loud noise when they did it. And steam, there was a lot, you heard the steam engine whistles all the time. So it was around you all the time. Mendota was kind of a railroad town.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did most people who weren't in, let's say, commercial district, were they all people work? Was it the biggest employer?
No, not by any means.
Or was it mostly farming?
Yeah, it was mostly agriculture related. I went back and looked at the records one time, and there were, at the time I was there and I started on the railroad, there were 75 employees with the railroad in Mendota.
And this was right during the war, actually, right? When you were growing up, was during World War II. Mm-hmm. Did that have a particular impact on you or on the town? You were too young for the Army, obviously, but were many people going off to war, or were the trains taking people away? Was that a big part of life there?
Well, I was a little bit young. I was born in 1938.
Yeah.
So what I do remember is my two older sisters had all their classmates got early drafted, and they were losing some classmates, and so I felt that.
Mm-hmm.
And when any of the guys came home on leave, their old high school classmates, they would come to our house.
Ah.
So there were always soldiers in our house, or
I see.
sailors,
Mm-hmm.
and then when the war was over, I can remember D-Day, clearly not
V-Day.
VE Day.
Yeah.
And Victory in Japan Day.
Mm-hmm.
Two. I remember those two events clearly because we all got in the car and drove around town honking our horn with everybody else. All the church bells were ringing.
Wow.
Factory whistles were blowing. We were honking our horn. Little kid would be hanging out the window of the car waving.
Yeah.
So it was I remember that very clearly.
Yeah. Did your grandparents live in Mendota, or?
No, I had no grandparents.
Okay.
They had all deceased early,
I see.
and so they were long gone by the time I came along.
How about in still staying in Mendota? Any teachers that were memorable that shaped you in any way or influenced you?
I went to a parochial grade school, and there were a couple of nuns there that I'll never forget. I remember in 8th grade, for example, this 8th grade nun, for some reason or other, she was the principal, chose me to be in charge of the money for the lunch program for the whole school. So I don't think I did but half the work required in 8th grade because I was busy going around to all the classrooms collecting the money, and then I'd take the money down to the cafeteria and say, here's today's money, and this is what the head count is. And they'd, we're gonna be short, I don't know, 3 loaves of bread or whatever it was. Would you go get it for us? So I'd get my bicycle, and I'd bike downtown to the local bakery and get that, and bring it back, and so.
You had no time for school?
No, and so anyway, that was fun, but she was good, she was always helping me do with the stuff, so.
What was your favorite subject in school?
Well, the favorite subject in high school would have to do with who the teachers were.
Yeah.
And the two were English and U.S. history, and wonderful teachers in both cases. Our U.S. history teacher was always related things of history to what happened to him personally, and so you could really relate to it.
Yeah.
He was very good.
Well, I mean, at that point, you're not that far off from the Civil War generation. You probably had a couple of people whose grandparents served in the Civil War or had some stories coming, American history is still pretty short period of time. We're not that far removed from some of those events. So.
That's right, and my dad loved to talk to me about his relatives that were in the Civil War, and I was always full of a lot of questions of him. I am to this day. I just ran into a person the other day he's 94, and his 3 uncles were in the Confederacy.
Wow.
And he remembered all their stories. I was picking his brains for stuff that was fascinating. So any connection to Civil War, I always jumped on right away.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So then you decided to go off to college to Marquette.
Yes.
Why did you go there?
A little bit of an amusing story. I had my mother's brothers some of them went to Knox in Galesburg, and my mother wanted me to go to Knox, and so that's sort of the direction I was headed and thinking what I wanted to do. Well, my dad thought Knox was a communist school.
Too liberal.
Too liberal. And so he had this, a correspondent banker from Chase Manhattan in New York that came to see him about once every 6 months. It was a small correspondent bank for them. And he was a graduate of Marquette. And so Dad arranged for him to recruit me. The next time he came to town, we had lunch together, the 3 of us. And as a result of that lunch, I decided I want to go to Marquette.
Wow.
So that's how I chose that school.
Wow. Well, you know, going back to Knox, and I think it's relevant to what we're doing at the Hall of Fame, the tradition of Knox and the tradition of Galesburg was as a abolitionist town, going back to the Civil War and back, you know, when we're talking now about the late 40s, early 50s, I guess, is when you're looking at schools, that tradition probably still carried on a little bit.
Oh, sure, yeah, no question about it.
Yeah. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So did you, were your years at Marquette fulfilling? Did you, what was it like there?
Very, love Marquette. Marquette is a Jesuit school, I'm Catholic, and so it worked, you know, it was a nice fit for me. And there's something about a Jesuit education that is special. And I drank the Kool-Aid, loved going to school there. And I can remember my senior year, second semester, every class, you know, I'd be looking out the window, listening to the professor, just hanging on every minute, because I knew this was going to come to an end, and I didn't want it to end. Yeah, and so it was a marvelous experience.
What did you major in there?
Business. But at that time at Marquette, business was 75% liberal arts. So I majored in finance, but minored in philosophy. And what was my second minor? History, I think. I forgot what my second minor, but I had 2 minors. Yeah.
And so you spent 4 years there. And when did you graduate? What?
1960.
Okay. So that was, at that point, had you decided on a career or what you were going to do post-graduation?
No. At that time, I was worried about the draft. And I was very close. They were going to get drafting probably within a few months of graduating, I figured. So I worked summers on the railroad as an operator, as I told you earlier. And no, I love that. It was a wonderful experience. I worked every single interlocking tower from Union Avenue in Chicago to Watauga, which is right outside of Galesburg.
So when you say you worked, you lived in Chicago for a while, or you?
Well, later I did, but when I was an operator in summertime, I'd work vacation relief.
I see.
And so over the course of 4 years, and even when I was at Marquette, my supervisor would call me up at Marquette. They were short of people. Hey, he said, do you think you could do an afternoon shift at Downers Grove next Saturday? I said, sure.
Wow.
And you know, pay is good.
Yeah.
So he'd send me a pass on the Milwaukee Railroad to take a train to Chicago. And then he sent me a pass on Burlington to take a suburban train to Downers Grove. And then I'd work the afternoon shift. I'd get a hotel room for $5 in the Downers Grove to go back the following day. Which incidentally, I made enough money working for the railroad to pay all my education costs.
Really?
With money left over.
During the summers, your summer vacations, and then these little part-time stints.
Yes.
Talking about the gig economy, that was, you really had a good.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, I'm working again in the summer after I graduated, and I volunteered for the draft. But what I volunteered for was 6 months active duty and 6 years, 5.5 years of reserve. And they gave me a date, and the date was, I think, in November of 1960, October. So I worked in the railroad all that time. Then when I came out of the service, my dad died while I was in the service. And so when I came out, I decided I could stay home and help my mother get things good. And so I went to work in the bank, my dad's bank.
I see.
And I worked there for about a year. And then I was in the process of interviewing banks in Chicago. And I was in the final interview stage for the Northern Trust Company in Chicago as a financial analyst. And I was on the train, going for my final signing of papers and everything. My old supervisor that I had as an operator was on the train that I was on. So he wanted to be brought up to date. And he asked me, you know, what's going on with you? So I told him, and he said, how would you like to come back to work for us? He says, I'm now in charge of a kind of a management training program. And he said, you're the kind of person I'd love to have. I said, well, how much does it pay? And I think he said $700 a month. Well, the Northern Trust was only offering me $500 a month.
What was the name of this man?
Forster Dussel.
Forster Dussel.
He just died a month ago at age 97, I think it is.
Was he still living in Mendota?
No, he lived in a suburb of west of Chicago.
I see.
Yeah.
So he's a pretty influential person in your life.
Oh yeah, oh absolutely. I mean, when I first started on the railroad, he was a dispatcher, and so he'd be the dispatcher, and basically I worked for him on the ship.
Yeah.
And then later on, he started getting promoted to other jobs. Good man, I liked him a lot.
Yeah.
And
he obviously liked you.
Oh yeah. Oh, he sure did. Yeah, no, we had a good relationship.
Well, let me just interrupt, just for the sake of, because I think there's a lot of terms that people don't even know what they mean.
Yeah.
What does an operator do?
Well, when I went to work, you had to learn telegraphy, and that's how your communication took place between you and the dispatcher. And the dispatcher they were at central locations. Each division basically had their own dispatcher's offices. I was on the Aurora, Illinois division, and so we had dispatchers in Aurora, and that's where he worked. And there would be a chief dispatcher. And my dispatcher, what I mean is, they wrote the train orders for how the railroads had to operate in conjunction with each other on what we call dark territory, where there's no signals. Where there's signals, he tells the operators what track to put the trains on. So there were operators basically every 10 miles on the Aurora division. So it was a jawbone railroad, we used to say.
Yeah. It was excuse me, what?
Jawbone. You talked your way through the operation.
And what kind of freight were they hauling at that point? Was it all agriculture, or was it?
Yes, the freight trains were either what we call merchandise trains, and they had all kinds of, what we called LTL, LCL, less than a carload, traffic that they combined in freight houses into a carload. And shame on the LTLs for trucks, that's less than a truckload. So, which I did later on. But anyhow, usually lots of grain, all the grain shipped in boxcars back then. And the boxcar was the general purpose car for everything. Gondolas shipping, scrap iron. So there was a whole, very busy. In Mendota at that time when I started, let's see, there were probably, on the Burlington, there were, I'm guessing, 9 passenger trains a day each way. Probably, let's see, the train sheet, we'd fill up a train sheet to half. So that'd probably be about 25 freight trains a day each way. And then the IC had, Illinois Central, had 4 trains a day each way, going north and south. And the Milwaukee had 2 trains a day each way. And the Illinois Central and the Milwaukee were on branch lines that no longer exist, they've all been taken up. But
so every hour there was something going on around the clock?
Every minute.
Yeah.
Because all 3 railroads switched in Mendota, they all had their own yards.
Yeah.
And so it was very, very busy with railroad sounds.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, a lot of towns, I think Galesburg certainly is still that way, I think.
Oh, yeah.
With, 100 or so
Yeah.
freight trains and Amtrak and,
Yes.
but,
They're much different today than they were back then.
yeah.
Much different.
Yeah.
But,
So you basically became a railroad guy, without any family connections to railroads, but because of this, I guess, it's always interesting to look at the coincidences in life and serendipity of if you hadn't had that job at the gas station,
right.
whether or not you would have found your way into the field.
No,
That was,
that's absolutely right.
yeah.
Yeah, and I realized.
$2.02 an hour is certainly beats 65 cents an hour. That was,
Yeah, that's right. So when I was offered this job
Yes.
at the Northern Trust Company and the Burlington at the same time, I told him, I said, well, what do I do to have to get the job to work for the railroad? And he said, well, you come and see me after you had your appointment at the Northern Trust. So I went into the Northern Trust and told the guy that I decided I was going to go to work for the railroad instead. That's before I even had the job. I was taking a risk. And he got a little upset with me and said, why a railroad? Why would you go to work for a railroad? I said, well, it pays $200 more a month than what you're paying. But there's no prestige. He says, when you work here, you'd have prestige.
you can't eat prestige.
I know. I said, well, I'll take my chances.
Were you married at that point?
No, all the way to marriage.
I see. Yeah.
And so I did, when the two offices are close together, Northern Trust is on LaSalle Street, and I just headed west on Jackson where the Burlington was, right on the other side of the river. In fact, I remember the phone number, Wabash 22345, 547 West Jackson Boulevard. And filled out all the papers and had my physical with the company doctor inside the office building. And I think by 4 p.m. I was an employee. That quick.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was, that's how it began.
So this would have been 61 or 60?
This
Graduated in
was
60, so then you went into the service.
Yeah,
Where were you stationed in the service?
two places. First was Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and the second place was Fort Hood, Texas.
Oh.
I can remember getting off the bus at midnight in Fort Hood, you know, and it was like February or March. Oh my God, this is wonderful, you know. When Fort Leonard was all rain and snow and cold, everybody had a cold, got off the bus and it was warm. Oh man, this is a good place.
So now you're in the railroad, and you're based in Chicago at that point?
Yes, the headquarters.
Yeah. And how long were you there?
I was there for, let's see, about 3 years in Chicago. And then I got transferred to Denver as a traveling car agent. And that's when I got married. I got married while I was in Denver.
And what were you doing? You were traveling?
Traveling car agent.
Traveling car agent?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does that involve? It sounds like something like a code for a undercover
That's right.
investigator or
But
something.
a little bit of that. I spied on other railroads in terms of what kind of traffic they were handling. I would sit, when their train would come in from the west, I'd sit outside the proviso yard in Chicago and record the car numbers, and then go back and find out where those cars came from. Get that information to our salespeople so that they could then go call on those customers, see if we get the business. Grand Junction, Colorado, that's where I was spying on the connection between the DNRGW Railroad and Missouri Pacific, because that's where they split at Grand Junction, where they're going to go east of Burlington, Denver, or east a little bit south to the Missouri Pacific.
So there was that much competition between the railroads,
in a sense. We all had the same price.
Yeah.
And the only thing you could compete on was who played the better golf, and so you know, and who served the best scotch, but that was not mine. We turned that over to the salespeople. So
it was just more selling and developing these relationships more than anything else, rather than pricing or
exactly, or service.
Yeah.
We all had the same thing.
That's amazing.
Selling a commodity. But then the other thing I did, I would go to different stations in the system where I was assigned to go and see that they were enforcing all the car handling rules. When this car is made empty, what are you supposed to do with it? Where are you supposed to build it? And I had a manual back then, this is before computers.
Sure.
And then when I got sent to Denver, my territory was Billings to Galveston. So I had everything north and south in that territory. So
From Galveston to where?
Billings,
No,
Montana.
well, it's not that long. That's a big
It was.
territory.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but there were passenger trains serving it, so I went everywhere by passenger train.
I see. I meant to ask during this whole time, were there any major, a couple of questions about, first of all, were there any major catastrophes or crises or derailments that stand out in your mind? Because that's usually when you read about railroads today, it's always when there's an accident or something. Was that common when you were coming up in the field?
Well, later on I had to deal with that a lot. So I had a lot of exposure to it later on in my career.
Mm-hmm.
But at that point, not too much. I remember one, I was in Dayton's Bluff, right outside of St. Paul, Minnesota, and there was a switchman that fell off a car and got run over, cut in half, and I saw it, so that was my first one.
Wow.
Not thinking there were many more to come in my career, which there were a lot, so.
Yeah, you never forget that.
No, not at all. Railroad's much safer today, much safer, so.
Yeah, well, I want to talk about that
Sure.
as we go through.
Sure.
Because I think that's part of the evolution of the industry that people don't really understand.
Yes.
How much has been done.
Yeah.
So now you're out in Denver,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when you got married.
Mm-hmm.
So talk a little bit about that event in your life.
Well, Colleen was a high school classmate.
So one of those high school classmates who
That's right.
stuck around.
Yeah, and she stayed in Mendota to work on her family business. And then when I came back to Mendota from the service to help my mother in that first year after Dad died, Colleen and I started dating a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so we dated off and on for 5 years. And when I got that transfer to Denver, that's when we decided to get married.
Uh-huh.
So while I was engaged to her before we actually got married, I would take the train every weekend from Denver to Mendota and back to Denver.
Wow.
And
That's
that
a
was,
long trip.
yeah, it's about a 14-hour train ride. Loved it. You know,
Yeah.
I had a pass now, I could get a sleeping car. And so I arrived in Mendota on Saturday morning about 7 a.m. and then leave Mendota Sunday evening at 5, 6 p.m. and get back into Denver 8 a.m. the following morning.
And you had the night you could stay on the train.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Right up in the dome car night.
So the railroads really influenced your courtship also.
It did, yeah, a whole lot.
Yeah. So how long were you in Denver and what did you do there?
I was driving car agent.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And that's when I had that territory from Galveston.
Oh, okay.
uh,
Yeah, the Billings.
Up to Billings.
Yeah.
And, but I was there less than a year, and I got transferred back to Chicago as a traveling car agent. Again, different territory. But then I started getting assignments in that kind of went through my whole career, where there were real difficult things that had to be solved. For some reason or other, my boss at the time would ask me
Mm-hmm.
to go tackle that particular hard issue.
Yeah.
And that's sort of how I'm all.
I kind of think that I don't want to stretch this analogy too much, but it seemed that throughout your career, just as the nun identified you as the one to collect the lunch money,
Yeah.
the responsibility
Oh,
that people identify you as the go-to person. Is that fair?
hadn't thought of it that way, but I guess that's right.
I mean, just I don't know what kind of qualities you
Yeah,
feel you had. You talked about your parents' influence on you a little bit about
sure.
leadership and teamwork or whatever it might be. That just occurs to me that it seems that people see you as reliable, I guess, consistent. Is that I'm not trying to put words in your mouth.
No.
But it seems like it's
Yeah,
a theme throughout your early career, certainly. And so this problem solving or being called on to, for example, what would they call on you to?
Oh, early on, like as a traveling car agent, there'd be a particular issue in Cicero, for example, that involved what kind of information was being collected by everybody. And it was a particularly difficult superintendent there. They wouldn't let anybody in, you know. And so they asked me to go take care of it. And when I walked into his office, he said, "Where's your hat?" Oh, no hat. He said, "You're gonna come to my yard, you're gonna wear a hat. You go get a hat."
Really?
So I went downtown Cicero, looked for a clothing store, bought myself a hat, and then came back in, and then he would talk to me, you know, and so it worked out good. I got what I needed, and
So traveling car agent sounds like it's an umbrella for a number of different. The job description's very, you know, how today you say other duties as assigned.
yeah,
Is that the way it was? You had a wide portfolio.
that's correct.
Yeah.
I sure did.
That's a great way to learn the industry.
Yeah, well, I learned a lot, you know. My days as an operator was valuable to me to the day I retired. I mean, that seems crazy, an obsolete technology, but it was. Because I understood railroad from the ground up, you know, worked with everybody, you know, people maintain track, you know, people that maintain bridges, people worked in the roundhouse. I had to deal with all those people, so it was good.
Yeah, I think that the complexity of railroads and the different levels of responsibility and how interconnected everything is quite amazing.
Yeah.
To make that whole system work.
Very down a complex network of everything,
And people make such a big difference.
well, they do make a big difference, but also organizationally, you know. I mean, I recognized early on, these weren't my words at the time, but since, you know, everything was in a silo. You know, all these responsibilities didn't come together any place in the organization. So it was always difficult to make them work well together. And so at the local level, even when I was just a lowly operator, I would work, you know, with all my telephones. I had what did I have in IC Tower, Mendota? I believe I had a total of probably 40 or 50 telephones. 40, 50 lines. And I would work at those things and work, help people convey information that I could see wasn't being conveyed. I was trying to solve problems that weren't really in my job description at the time, but I liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun.
So when did you become a train master? When did that?
My first train master job was in Lincoln, Nebraska in 1968. And
So up until that time, you were a
traveling car agent.
traveling car agent.
And I got transferred to Lincoln with Colleen. We had one baby by that time. And rented a home on 400 Frost Drive. I can remember the address in Lincoln. And rented a home from the head of the physics department at the University of Nebraska, which was helpful because I learned a lot from him. And as an assistant train master in Lincoln, I sat in a train master's office across a desk like this. I was on one side of the desk, and the train master's on the other side of this. His name was Bob Huff, and he was from Childress, Texas. I loved that guy. He was so good. I learned so much from him, and yet we were entirely different from one another. I remember I was on the phone one day, and I looked across at him, he was sitting there looking at me, rolling thumbs around. He said, "What do you do on that telephone all the time?" I said, "Well, that's talking to people, solving problems." He said, "You can't solve a problem with a person unless you can see their eyes." I said, "Well," the demonstrator I'm talking about, he'd get on the phone and he'd just phone around, had a hard time. He was talking to a yardmaster one day in Hastings, Nebraska, in our territory, 100 miles west of us. He gets so frustrated with the guy, he said, "You stay right there." He hung up the phone and said, "I'm going to Hastings, I'll be right back." He drove 100 miles to Hastings to deliver this guy a 5-minute message because he couldn't see his eyes. And he turned around and came back. And And he called me English, but he always looked at me strange. He didn't understand how I did things. But he was a smart guy. I learned more from him.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, I worked for him, but I was a trade master. He was assistant superintendent in Omaha. And I remember one time he came to me. He says, "You get that guy into your office and bring him in a new rear end because he's screwed up about 4 times around something or other." He said he's down in the lunchroom. So I got a guy called Blackie Johnson, who was kind of like a jury investor. I said, "Go down to the lunchroom, bring us soda to my office." The guy came in the office, and I, said, "No more of this," and we talked it through, and he left. And so later on, I asked Blackie, I said, "Did he get the message?" He said, "Well," he said, "it wasn't what Greenwood said to me that shook me up, it was the way that Bob Huff looked at me when I walked into his office."
Because you were sharing the same office.
No, well, he was the one next to me,
Oh, I see.
but he was standing in his
I
office entryway when this other guy walked by and we were Jason's office.
So he had that ability to just give you a look.
Oh, Bob was wonderful.
Yeah.
I really liked that guy a lot. Yeah.
Was there a generational divide in the industry between the mostly men at that point who had gone to college and those who just came up through the ranks, and was that part of what you were
Yes.
describing? Sounds like Bob Huff was not a college.
That's right.
guy.
He was an engineer, locomotive engineer.
Yeah.
And I just smile every time I think of him because he was such a character, but so good.
So what did the train master do? What did he do as a train
Well,
master?
as either assistant train master, you had a territory, and you basically were in charge of all stations. As one guy said to me on the first job, he said, "Your responsibility is from right-of-way fence to right-of-way fence." Basically, which meant anything that went on the track, whether it's train crews, maintenance, anything at all, you've got some responsibility for it.
Huh.
But it was primarily train crews, and
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of discipline cases. Any discipline, you'd conduct the
Was
investigation.
was it unionized at that point?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you had a lot of dealings with the union.
All the time,
Yeah.
all the time.
How'd that go?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Our unions were pretty good. I remember in Lincoln, the local chairman of the union, that's the head guy, he'd come into me, and this would never happen today. He said, "So-and-so is calling in sick too many times," one of his own members.
Yeah.
"I want you to hold an investigation on him."
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
believe that.
Yeah.
I think that very often the union relied on management to keep their own members in line.
Yeah,
Because someone's gonna be a problem to management.
Yeah.
That person may be a problem to the union.
that's
as
right,
well.
yeah, that's right.
That's interesting,
Uh-huh.
yeah. So how long did you do that?
I was in Lincoln until 1970. Now, we had the merger in March of 1970.
The merger of Burlington?
Burlington, Great Northern, and Northern Pacific. And I forgot to tell you a story when I was traveling car agent.
Mhm.
One of the things that what I did was on a merger committee. And there were 3 of us. And our job was to go around and see and analyze every railroad in the industry's data system, so that we could come back with a recommendation about where the best data system was, benchmarking basically.
Mhm.
And I did that, and so I got the advantage of seeing every railroad headquarters in the United States, the major railroads. Get to know some of the people, see what their data system was, and
Did they willingly share that?
yeah, they did.
So who was the best? What were the?
Well, in my view, our view, it was the Southern Railroad,
Huh.
and the worst was the Southern Pacific Railroad. So we came back with a recommendation. Guess what? We went with the Southern Pacific system.
Why?
I learned we were merely window dressing to come up with something, come up with the right answer. We came up with the wrong answer. Because our vice president of finance at the time was from the Southern Pacific.
I see, that's
So
what
he wanted us to use their system. Terrible system. I mean, it was labor intensive and capital intensive. And we paid the price for 10 years of.
Just by how you collect data.
Well, yeah, and what you're interested in is data accuracy. They have the worst data accuracy of any system, and the Southern had the best. And so, anyway, that was fun. But so you asked me earlier, you know.
So go ahead.
Yeah. So what did I do as a train master? And when I got transferred to that's what you asked me.
Yeah. Well, from being assistant train master, then train master, then you got in 1970.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Transferred to.
Yeah. I got transferred from Lincoln, where I was assistant train master, to Omaha, a new region office, to be in charge of all equipment distribution on the entire Omaha region. And so I had probably, I don't know, half a dozen, maybe 10 car distributors working for me.
Mm-hmm.
And thus began some of the things I sort of did outside the box, you know. I had a lot of disputes with headquarters. You know, they told me that I had to send all the covered hopper cars. We made it free up north because they had better revenue per car. Well, I had better terms than they did with lower revenue, and I got more revenue per car from a number of different trips. And so I figured out, how do I get covered hoppers here?
Well, what are you calling it? Covered?
Oh, excuse me. That's a car for loading grain.
Mm-hmm.
It's better than a box car. It's got a hopper. It's got a top
Yes.
entry for putting the grain in. The grain flows out at the bottom, the gates. And from my days in Cicero as a traveling car agent, I knew a lot of people. And so I called the people who worked the night shifts, and I said, when you get these new cars coming from Pullman Standard, and I knew what time they'd come in delivery at night, I want you to card, and that was just a terminology that was used to where you build the car to, where to go. I want you to build those cars to me in Omaha. And they did. And so for several months, I was getting every new covered hopper coming around. And I set up this wonderful turn system where the cars would load, they'd be sent west to load wheat in eastern Colorado. And they'd come back to triple elevator in Omaha, unload the wheat. And then we'd load corn for grain, for feedlots in Omaha. And I sent it back. I get one round trip of your car. Up north, they were getting one round trip every 2 months with the same car. And so.
And the reason for that? Why were you so much more efficient?
Because I set up service to match the equipment,
Huh.
and it worked as those turns. Well, I got discovered, and the head transportation guy, called our region vice president. You know, so I want you to fire him. And so the guy that was our head guy came back to me and asked what this is all about, and I told him, and he said, "Look, I'm not going to fire you. You did the right thing." And guy up in St. Paul never forgot that, and he never forgave me. He tried to screw me over anytime he got a chance later on.
Even though you were improving production or improving
But that wasn't
the
issue.
operation.
I was disobeying
I see.
instruction.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that was my first escape. You know, many more to come. But so now I'm in Omaha. I'm in charge of distribution there, and I had 2 traveling car agents that worked for me in the field. And since I had been one time, you know, I set these guys up, and we had a problem with our orders were always way inflated for how many cars each station wanted. Station may have a capacity order to load maybe 10 cars a week at a grain elevator. Well, they would have orders in for 100 cars, because the idea was the more orders you have in, the better chances are you're going to get equipment. We wanted to improve the car ordering system. So I worked with another department who, in the relay office, who gets the orders, because all the telegraph wires and things from the field would come into them. And I, as a traveling car agent, I'd worked with these new IBM punch cards and things. So I designed a system for the IBM punch cards, for the people in the field to put their orders in a certain exact format, same way. And to come into this place in Lincoln, and in the Omaha, come into the relay office. And I had to have these two guys go out and train every station agent on my region, which there are a lot. I had no budget for this, for anything. And so these two guys agreed to sleep in tents at night.
Wow.
They were so committed to the project.
Wow.
We had no money.
Huh.
I had money to pay them for meals, but that's it. So they did that, and they were out for, I think it took them 2 months to get all the field people trained. Meanwhile, parallel with this, up in St. Paul, where the headquarters was, they were spending millions of dollars on this stupid top systems, which had their own car ordering system, which was going to, I don't know how long it's going to be before we ever got that. I want to solve this problem now. So anyway, we got the thing going, and I got the orders, and I had accurate orders now for every station that came in for my car distributors to work with and set up. Didn't cost us anything.
Huh.
Used, I don't know, the relay guys said, don't worry about it, we can get you the IBM punch cards, you know. And they, I don't know, it was designed a way that they could go from telegraph to teletype to punch cards. I mean, design that inside. You know, it's very unique.
Yeah.
So it was a team of sorts, you know,
Yeah.
and we're all really very proud of what we had achieved. It was good, and it worked. And I used to say to the people, I'd say, well, you gotta come down here and see our ordering system. You know, it won't cost you anything.
They didn't have people who were willing to live in tents.
Yeah, well, that's true,
Yeah.
but they could have done it with a budget. But, so that's one of the main things I remember from that job I had as head of car management in Omaha. And then I got promoted to train master in Omaha, working for assistant superintendent Bob Huff again. So we came back together again in Omaha.
I see.
And I had I had short territory. I had Omaha, Pacific Junction, and Iowa, and Council Bluffs, Iowa, and Omaha, Nebraska. And so I already told you one story about what happened when we was in Omaha. And I worked there for, let's see, probably about a year and a half. And there was a huge meltdown in Cicero. And by that I mean they had gone into gridlock. And there was, the Interstate Commerce Commission had put a order out banning any further movement of cars through the Burlington and Cicero, 5,000 cars on hold. And
What was the cause of that? Of this
I have to
gridlock?
be very careful. The cause of it was that we got a new CEO who's from Chicago, and he wanted to do his civic duty. So he said, for the next year, we'll only hire hardcore, unemployed people in Cicero. And this hardcore, unemployed group of people basically didn't come to work on time, laid off sick all the time, didn't want to work when they got there, and it was horrible. So when this, I was one of the people who was tapped to go in and help solve the problem. And I went as an assistant superintendent, nights. There was already assistant superintendent days there. I went as assistant superintendent nights. And I got the call, and I was told to report there the following day. No time at all.
Was this like 1970s?
73.
73, okay.
And it was terrible. Tell you about my first afternoon that I was there. I heard this, I was on my office on the second floor of the yard office at Cicero. And there was I could hear all this noise coming from down below me, which is where the lunchroom was. So I ran down there, and there was this race fight going on between, there were blacks on one side and whites on the other side, and there was a black man and a white woman screaming and yelling at each other, throwing stuff at each other.
Wow. In the lunchroom.
in the lunchroom. So I waded into it, in the middle of it, and got them stopped. And I had the office manager was there, and I said, "You take him, the guy," and I said, "I'll take her." And so I hadn't spent 30 seconds with her. I recognized the problem. She was drunk. And so I wanted to take her. In those days, you go to the hospital and get an alcohol, get a blood test done.
Yes.
Or
Breathalyzer, yeah.
So I got the special agent, who was a railroad detective, to drive us over there to the hospital in Cicero.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "You guys stay in the car. I'm gonna run in there and get permission." Got the permission, came out. I said, "Okay, you come with me." And he said, "She has something she wants to tell you." "What do you want to tell me?" "I'm not going. I refuse to go." I raised the hair in the back of my neck. I looked over at him. I knew he told her not to do it. Our own guy.
Yeah.
Someday I'm going to find out, you know. So anyhow, we still ran out getting what we wanted, and enough of stuff to hold the investigation fire. And turned out that she was fighting him because he said something about her that she said was false, and that's why they had the fight.
They literally physically fighting.
Yeah, physically fighting. I got that solved.
Yeah.
I no longer sit down at my desk, and I hear this, we had that speaker where all the yard information comes over, and someone radios a train coming in the yard radios it. "I think we just ran over somebody in the yard."
This is your first day?
First day,
Yeah.
first afternoon.
Yeah.
And so I get in my car and run up there, you know, and sure enough, there's a off-duty brakeman, I think from Galesburg, who wandered out he was gonna go get something to eat, just wandered in front of a moving train, you know,
Yeah.
and it got cut in half.
So and this is not the first time you've seen that?
No,
Yeah.
second time,
Yeah.
yeah, and many more to come.
To go back to this situation in Cicero,
Mm-hmm.
at that point, your position was as assistant superintendent?
Correct.
Yeah. And were there other troubleshooting? That's quite a first day on the job.
Yeah. There were a total of 18 of us that were brought in, and that happened to be my particular job, was that one. But you know, we got the place turned around in a matter of 8 weeks.
Well, I think that time in the country was a big turning point as far as race relations were concerned. I think about the late 60s, early 70s as quite a big transition going on. And I imagine in the railroad industry, as far as labor was concerned, that was could be quite a tense time. I don't know how you saw it.
Yeah, it was very tense at the time, and it was so hard to deal with, you know. I got my first experience from before that, though, when I was in Lincoln as assistant train master. I hired what might have been the first black employee in train service, and I just wanted to, you know. I mean, I wanted to get it going a little bit. We didn't have any mandate or anything at that time. And it caused me a lot of problems, because the union came in and said, "We want individual hotel rooms for everybody to stay in." See, at that time, they teamed up. They'd stay 2 to a room. And they said, "We're going on no agreement, individual rooms, stay in," because.
Because you had it.
Yeah. And I believed in this guy, except he had the problem of coming to work on time and calling in sick and one another, and I just kept working with him. And then finally got him, you know, to where he was self-disciplined, learned how to get up on time, come to work on time. And this night I got a note from him when he retired, you know.
How did he stay with the railroad?
Oh, I stayed with the railroad his whole career.
What was his name?
Oh, I can't even remember now.
Okay, yeah.
But he stayed with the railroad for 30 years. So
And you wrote a note to you?
I wrote him to me, yeah.
Yeah.
So now I'm in Cicero, and then there's not one person, there's 150 of them, you know. And, oh, gee, you know, I mean, it was so hard. We wound up firing, gosh, I don't know, 120 people, something like that. As a way to get the place going, but.
Black and white?
Well, almost all black, because those were all the new employees that were coming to work on time. So we had a step process, you know. First offense, you talk to them.
Right.
Second offense, you hold investigation, you mark their record. Third offense, you give them another chance. Fourth offense, you're fired. So I called this one guy in and I said, you got only one more chance. I said, I don't understand why you, I said, every time I talk to you, you have to have off because your grandmother died. And I said, I pulled it down the paper. Here's 4 grandmothers that died in the last 3 months with you. I said, you know, how many grandmothers do you have? Oh, I have a lot more, he said. So, and ultimately, he failed to come to work one day, and that was it.
Yeah.
And it was just so difficult. We did the best we could. But later on, we got a class action lawsuit over it and lost.
Oh, really? Over the firings?
Yeah. Well, I say lost. They settled. They didn't want the publicity.
Who was the plaintiff? Who sued you?
Oh, some plaintiffs are lawyers. All I know.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Not an organization?
On behalf of all those people that
I see.
fired.
Yeah.
So.
You settled on it.
Yeah, that was some years later that took place. But the important thing is we got the things back up and running together again. And I had one other incident that took place where I almost got fired again. We were short of power, that's locomotives, to make our deliveries at night to other railroads. And we're backed up and congested as a result. And every night I talked to Power Control, which was a place in St. Paul that managed all the locomotives on the railroad. Big board, with magnets showing every locomotive. We probably had 3,000 locomotives at the time. And the guy he'd say to me, you've got 3 or 4 units there in the diesel shop in Cicero. Why don't you just take those? I said, no. I said, we don't have any down there. And so he said, well, I show you got 3 that are okay, Dad, for whatever. So I went down to the diesel shop and looked at their records. I didn't ask anybody, I just went. Looked at the records, and they didn't match what people in St. Paul had at all. And I couldn't figure out why, but I'd tell them, okay, here are the locomotives that they really have that are not ready and they're working on, but they told you they're ready. I did that every night and I got power. They then would give me power, to allocate power from some other source to make my deliveries. That went on for about 3 weeks. One morning, about 7 a.m., the superintendent comes in, Charlie Cack. He says, you and I have to go downtown. That's what the general manager's office was. I said, what for? He says, I don't know, but we're in trouble for something. Do you have any idea? No, I don't have any idea. So we went to the general manager's office, a guy by the name of Jack Hamer. And the guy next to him was the head of the mechanical department, charge of locomotive maintenance. And I walked into the office with Charlie Cack, and that guy just said to me and said, I got you stopped me, but I'm going to get you fired. You stay out of our business. Oh boy, what's this about? Still didn't know. And so Jack Hamer, sitting in his desk, started talking, now look, we all work together as a team. We have these goals to make. And if we make these goals, we all get a bonus. Locomotive readiness is one of the goals. And you are ruining it by telling them what these locomotives aren't ready. Well, we're reporting it's ready because we want that bonus.
Wow.
Now, do you understand? I didn't say anything. He said, you better understand or you're gone. Yes, sir. That's it. And as I walked out, this other guy, Tom Cotter, he looked at me and he said, I got you. And I'm going to watch you from now on.
So how did you resolve that?
I quit going down to the diesel shop and see what the records were.
Did you get your bonus?
It wasn't my bonus, it was
Oh,
their
it's their
bonus.
bonus,
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
So do you think that that was a common practice? And that multiplied through the system could make it really
absolutely.
pretty inefficient?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's right. And so I complied,
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
and then, now on the other hand, about 2 months after this, I get a call and said, hey, we're promoting you to staff assistant to the region vice president. And so I left Cicero, went to the downtown region office in Chicago, and working for the same guy who was gonna fire me.
This is 73, 74?
73,
Yeah.
74,
Yeah.
yeah, that's 74.
So how long did you stay there?
Well, I was there about a year, did a lot of things there. It's like all jobs I went on. They tell me my job is one thing and it's mundane, it's
Yeah.
looking at records or one thing or another. But I'd see opportunities. Now I knew from my days as a traveling car agent, another thing I've been doing, we had this new big coal business was about to emerge.
Mm-hmm.
And every region was supposed to come up with an operating plan. Our region didn't have one yet. So I just took it on myself
Mm-hmm.
to develop a region plan for what had to be done. And so we did, and Jack Hamer, and I said, I need to make a trip around the region to get people certain kind of information. Would you, set that up for me? He said, better yet, I'll go with you. And so we hired out the whole region, got the stuff I needed, put a big plan together. Then we called all the operating people in from the whole region, and I made a presentation. It turned out we now had the best plan of any of the 5 regions. And Jack Hamer and our region vice president proudly took our plan to St. Paul to show what they had done.
Mm-hmm.
And so about 3 weeks after that, I get a call. They want to promote me to director of strategic planning for the whole railroad. And so I packed up and moved to St. Paul. And now I'm director of strategic planning for the whole railroad.
For the whole Burlington line?
Oh yeah, all
Yeah.
Burlington Northern, yeah. And now I'm working for the guy who's vice president of strategic planning.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that I was a director.
I see.
I tell you, I was in so much over my head. I didn't know anything. I mean, all these guys that work for me, they were bright MBAs, that were educated way different. And,
So by this time you were not quite 40. You're not 40 years old at that point.
no, not yet.
Yeah.
So, I remember we had a president, we had 3 presidents of the railroad, different division. And one president of the railroad grew up speaking Norwegian language of some sort. I couldn't speak English well at all. So one of my jobs was to write a board speech for this guy. So I wrote a board speech. I wrote an outline for a board speech and sent it to him to call me if he had any questions. After the board meeting, Tom Lanford, another president, came in. I hear you wrote this speech for Lawrence. I said, that's right. He says, look, he gave a speech of what you said. I sent him a draft. He's got to basically good point. Roman numeral 1A, this is a B, this is a C. That. So, got balled up for that. He said, you do that again, I'll fire you. So, anyway, I wrote another, next board meeting. I made sure I went to his office, talked to him, saw, showed him what he had, and then just sent him an outline, sent him the whole speech. He liked it. Tom Lanford comes in after that. You idiot, don't you know he can't pronounce THs? You can't use TH in a speech for him. Oh, geez. Speech writing was not one of my best skills, So, so now the railroad has got, while I'm on that job, they're negotiating a new contract, first time ever, for any railroad in the industry. Amtrak chose Burlington Northern as the first railroad to negotiate with. And the negotiations weren't going anywhere. so somehow or other, I got called on to be in charge of the negotiating team for Amtrak. And I remember I had to go to the attorney that was in charge of everything else. And, I mean, these people were so learned, you know, and here I am, this country train master coming in and said, I'm going to lead this Amtrak negotiation. And,
Did you have any counsel with you, or any?
yeah, him, the guy whose place I was put over him.
I see.
Yeah. And so, anyhow, that wound up with me spending 6 months in Washington DC negotiating Amtrak contract. And they were hard, really tough, because we had to negotiate it within the framework of the law that was passed creating Amtrak. They gave them all kinds of power and authority. They were hard negotiations. And the negotiating team in Amtrak, they have a cheering squad. They'd be sitting back in the room. Anytime I took some point that wasn't favorable to them, they'd jeer, you know, yeah, boo,
Really?
oh yeah.
During the negotiation?
Oh, during negotiations. Yeah.
And this was negotiating over the use of the track, freight versus passenger?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, it got down to either about 100 points to solve, and we got maybe all but about 5 or 6 major ones solved. This was an important contract. It was going to be the boilerplate for the whole industry.
Mm-hmm.
So the next group to come in to help me finally close it out was the operating vice president, chief financial officer, the general counsel, 5 vice presidents. And they came to work with me on it, moving it to roll on. And we did. We after about a week in Washington DC, intense negotiating, we finally got a contract signed.
Mm-hmm.
And the operating vice president looked at me and he said, I not only like what you did, but I like the way you did it.
Hmm.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
So I'm going back to St. Paul now to continue to be director of strategic planning.
Let me interrupt 1 second. Can you remember any, what was the biggest point of contention between, I mean, of these 100 items, you know, what was the thorny, one of the example of the thorniest problem? Because this still is a problem today, isn't
Right.
it, of sharing
Right.
the tracks and the right of way?
The biggest problem was that we wanted to, we agreed to an incentive being paid to us if we provided on-time performance. And we wanted that, and they agreed to it. We want, what I wanted was for them to be responsible for delays to the freight trains that are caused by Amtrak.
I see.
And they said, that is a non-starter. Well, I left it on the list anyway. And that was the hardest one, and we lost that one. But it was on the list right up
I see.
there.
Yeah. So then you go back to St. Paul.
Yeah, I go back to St. Paul. Now I'm back in this environment. Well, what do I do now? But the operating vice president solved that, and he wound up promoting me to terminal superintendent for a brand new yard that just opened up in Minneapolis, classification yard. And so that was my next job. And again, you know, I had to put a team together, people, and the team that I liked. Had to fight with the regional vice president because he liked people who were dopes, in my estimation. Yeah.
So you had to reach into the...
Yeah, I had to fight him on this stuff. Yeah.
How big a yard was it? How many tracks was?
What was the largest in the country at the time? It was before North Platte. It got as big as it is for the UP. But it was the largest in our railroad.
So was it 20, 30 tracks? Or,
I believe it was 63 classification tracks.
Wow.
And, my memory, you know, probably,
That's big, yeah.
yeah, eight receiver tracks. It was a big yard.
Mm-hmm.
The most modern in the world. And as a result, I was giving tours every day to somebody of that yard, including the Russians. And I have a funny story on that.
Yeah.
So I've got, the Russian railroad system is run by 12 superintendents, the top guys in the railroad, very Russian.
Yeah.
Spoke through an interpreter. And had them all up in the hump tower, with everything staged, ready to go. We had the train ready to start humming, so they see how it's automatic. We had distanced a coupling feature. We knew how much to retard the wheels of the car to hold the car's speed at the right speed, over the hump. We had wind resistance. We measured the wind, what kind of resistance. We had routing, cars were automatically routed by the car number being a punch card, and it was run from the yard office across the tracks. Anyway, we said go. So our locomotives are pushing them up over the hump. You know, they don't really sit in there because the computer also runs the locomotive. And about 3 cars get over top of the hump, start down the other side. All of a sudden, everything freezes up. The retarders freeze up to stop the cars. The locomotive stops moving. Bells and whistles are going off in the tower. Something's wrong. And we don't know what it is. And everybody's panicking. And the head Russian guy looked at me and says, in Soviet, you go to Siberia.
Was he kidding?
No, he was serious. So they turned out the clerk in the yard office loaded the cards backwards. And so our edit systems picked up that these cars weren't the right matching weight, they weren't the right destination, and so that's why it froze up. Took them half an hour to figure out what the problem was. Got solved. Then we impressed them after that. But they lied about everything that they had. Oh, this is nothing. You switch 2,000 cars a day. We have 4,000 cars a day in our yards.
So that, I'm interested in this, the design of this new facility. Who would do the design? Did you have a unit, engineering unit that just designed classification yards and things like that?
Well, we had an engineering unit to oversee it, but they contracted that out, the actual design.
Yeah,
I don't
that's quite a special niche
Oh, yeah.
in the industry.
I don't remember who it was that they had to do it, but there were a lot of startup issues with that place. Just this.
And your title there was?
Terminal superintendent.
Terminal superintendent.
Yes, yeah. And I was there on that job for a couple of years, and then in 1979, phone rang again from the state operating vice president that was with on those Amtrak negotiations, John Hertog, wonderful guy. And he says, I'm sending you to Alliance. He said, we got a terrible situation there. He said, good luck. We got to build new railroad, we got to maintain railroad, we got to run trains, and we can't seem to do either well at all. And I said, okay. So I went to Alliance.
This is 1979.
1979. First day I'm there, I say to one of the train masters, let's go for a high road trip. I'm gonna high road at least up as far as Hyannis, not Hyannis, Hemingford. Couldn't go any further than that because the sun would go down. You don't high road that night. We get halfway there, and I get a call over the radio. New superintendent Greenwood, call so-and-so on a private phone. So I called, and they said, there's a walkout, sick out occurring. We've had 26 engineers calling sick in the last hour. And I said, oh, they're sending you a message. The new day.
Wow.
And so I turn on highway back. I call up on the very first engine I see in the yard. I introduce myself. I says, I know what's going on. I said, I'm going to a motel room. Here's my room number. Give me spirit now. Tell them I'm ready to talk. Whoever wants to talk. And at 2 a.m. this is knocking on my door. And these 2 scraggly looking guys come in. Oh my gosh. This is a hell of a lot lower cut people than I'm used to dealing with on those jobs. And anyway, we talked myself with all the union people in the union hall that night after dinner. And
So this will be your second day.
yeah. And so I went to union hall all by myself, and I'm telling you, they had the wives, the children, union people, and there are complaints where they can't get off work. And if they get off work, they hold an investigation on them, and they're being treated unfairly. There just aren't enough people wondering about it. I made notes, but the spouses were the ones that were just hated me, screamed at me, all the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Alliance was totally a railroad town. Right?
Yeah, totally railroad
And
town.
totally Burlington, Northern town.
Totally Burlington down
So
Yeah.
you stepped in, were you surprised by all of this?
there. Yes, I knew, I was told it was bad, but I didn't know it was this bad, And so, anyway, I promised everybody that I would get going on all these problems they talked about. I said, well, I'll solve it. I had no idea how I was going to do it. And I worried about it a lot the next couple of days. The genuine problem, meanwhile, the place is just terrible congestion. Nothing's happening that's right. Derailments, 2 or 3 derailments every day, all over the division. So, excuse me, I had a board of directors special. It was scheduled to come through Alliance. Like 4 days, 5 days later. I thought to myself, I'm gonna go for broke. I'm gonna put together a plan for resources I need. I'm gonna present it to all the highest ranking officials on the railroad on that train. And if they don't give it to me, I can't stay here. I can't do this unless I get resources. So, I want this board training to be handled right. And so I got everybody together, and I got the engineering department together. When the board training was gonna stop, for example, 12, 15 cars. I had the engineering department draw up a diagram where the cars would be, where I want to stop, where the locomotive would stop. And then I had an officer, division officer, stationed at each door opening, all the way back on the. And then I had them paint on the platform an X, the number, so everybody knew what their assignment was, and it was going to be on that car. I said, "You're nuts." I said, "We have board specials out here all the time. We don't do all this." I said, "Well, you're going to do it now." So we went off perfectly. We stopped, went to the Alliance Country Club, had a big dinner for them, then came back, got on the train, and I got on the train with them. And I'm going to ride as far as I have to get my message to every senior officer on the railroad. I started Blue Make chairman of the board. His response, and what I asked for, I want 27 new division officers. I need more train masters, assistant superintendents. I want to set up a control center for running the division, and all kinds of stuff. Makes it, why is it, if anytime anybody new goes somewhere, they gotta have more people.
This is Lou Meg.
Lou Meg, then I went to Norman Lawrence, and was one of the presidents, Tom Happer, another president. Went to the CFO, whatever, talked to everybody. Nobody said yes, but nobody said no. So when I got back into Alliance the following day, I wrote a letter to my boss in Denver. He was assistant vice president of operations. I said, "I've made this presentation to the board, and they've approved it."
Because nobody said no.
Nobody said no. And he said, he called me on the phone, "Oh, I said, it's the most outrageous thing I've ever seen." He said, "Nobody's gonna approve anything like that." Well, they did. I said, "By the way, here's Lou Make's phone number, you wanna call him and ask him?"
So you got it, you got it.
Well, not through him, I didn't.
Oh,
Meantime, I had a couple friends that worked in the vice president of operations office in St. Paul. I sent them the same letter too. I said, "You're gonna hear something on this, and this is what's happened." I told them the real story, the truth, but they were supportive of me.
yeah.
So, anyway, so when I picked up the phone, he said, called this guy, my boss in Denver, said, "Say, we're supposed to get a new operating plan for the Alliance Division We haven't seen it yet, you have it. So I got the people.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Made all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
We went from loading 2 coal trains a day to 12, almost overnight. I mean, our derailments went way down. Our productivity went way up. I mean, everything. Our safety record was the worst in the industry. Our safety record, we had a ratio, frequency severity ratio of over 100, which means that every employee gets hurt more than once a year. And we brought that down in the first year down to about 18, which is still the worst in the industry, but direction.
And this was all because you got more resources.
Yeah, and I put together plans to how they work and what they were to do. I created a control center, took the control of the railroad away from the dispatchers, and gave it to this new control center, staffed with train masters. I mean, it was beautiful, worked wonderful.
And did it become a model for other divisions?
No, because no other division had this problem like we did.
I see.
Yeah, so it was a big, huge success.
In creating that team that you brought in there, were these insiders within the company, or you picked them from other companies? So these
They were inside the company. First of all, nobody wants to come to Alliance.
Right. Where is Alliance? And
It's in the panhandle of Nebraska.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
you know, close to the Colorado and Wyoming border. So I arrived there, and every officer that's there wants out. They're burned out.
Yeah.
And I learned very quickly that no one's going to come. So I put out a word to all my, I never worked in personnel. I always worked directly with my own network.
Mm-hmm.
You got anybody in the ranks that you've been wanting to promote that's good, that you can have a lot of confidence in, I'll take them. And I said, the older the better. So I got a bunch of old guys, and who were really, really good. Guys that were, you know, in their 50s. And and then I got a bunch of young guys just off the training program. And so the older guys were the mentors to the new young guys. Worked wonderful. And I wouldn't take anybody who wasn't of the style of management I was. A popular style at the time was, you know, beat 'em up, motivated by fear, and that's not my style. No.
So you were more collaborative?
Collaborative, yeah, work as a team. So it was.
That's a tough culture to overcome.
That's right.
You know, if you have a culture that's so embedded,
Yeah.
and you're talking about a company that was, what, at that point, 100 years old or
Oh yeah.
more?
Very definitely.
Yeah. So what made you know that that was the right approach? I mean, that was so contrary to everything else that was going on there. What do you attribute that?
I had to solve a problem, and I only knew. I knew that if I didn't solve this problem, I was done. You know, I was toast.
So you had the fear.
Yeah, right.
You didn't translate that to the others.
I wouldn't be done. They wouldn't fire me. But, you know, I mean,
Right.
that'd be my career and my job, and I'd be sent up to where my predecessor was sent to.
Yeah.
Some unknown place in the Iron Range in Minnesota. So I had another major problem in the division, alcohol abuse.
Mm-hmm.
They were so short of people, they were hiring anybody that could breathe practically. And most of them were kids, 19 years old, 20 years old. And my predecessor held his meetings with the union guys at the American Legion Club in the evening.
Imagine what that was like.
He never fired one single person on Rule G the whole time he was there. Rule G is about drugs and alcohol abuse. So you know what our team did? We fired 160 people for alcohol abuse in the first probably 90 days I was there.
In your division?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
It was awful.
Yeah.
I remember, and they weren't complying with all the rules of safe operations, you know, and I mean, it was totally out of control.
Wow.
People just wouldn't believe these new people I brought in, well, what kinds of things are happening.
Yeah.
And so when we solved the drug and alcohol problem, at least to the degree that we solved it, I asked part of the team of people, 27, I wanted two drug abuse, alcohol abuse counselors on my staff. So I had two of them on the division. No other division had their own,
Wow.
own counselors. I wanted two because I knew I had this problem. And so I remember one time I was high rating after I'd been on division about 6 months. It was up around Gillette. And we were waiting for some trains to move. And this guy came off the locomotive that was parked near us, and he said, "Are you Mr. Greenwood?" I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "I just want to thank you. You're a man of Jesus, I can tell. Everybody knows you have to be that way because of the way you have handled this alcohol problem we had. Wow, God bless you, man." Thank you. God bless you.
And at this point, was this a totally white male culture, right?
Yes.
You had very few women, if any?
No, I had women.
In management positions?
No. But I had women, brakemen, women knew, you know, which was a real social problem in itself. Lots of fights would break out, you know, over whose woman, what men these women belonged to. And it was always solid stuff like that. But there were a number of social issues on the division because they were so young. And it was just things that you never dream happening, you know, this would happen all the time.
Yeah.
One time, I'd been there a while, at least a year, and my secretary came in to see me one night at 5 o'clock, time to go home. And Mr. Greenwood, could you come into the conference room, please? The women of the office want to talk to you. Now in the other office I had a male chief clerk, and working for him was about, I'm saying 12 women clerks worked for him. So I go in, and here's all these stone-faced women sitting in this conference room. And I thought, oh, well, I'm going to sit down. And my secretary tells me where to sit. And so she says, on the first seat to my left over here, she said, each one of these women have a story they want to tell you. It was about the chief clerk. They start, and about something he had done, not done, he didn't do anything physical, it was what he said, and what he suggested. And everyone, after they tell the story, they cry. Wow. I sat there and listened to 12 of these. Everyone. You know. And I said, I thanked them, and I said, I'll take care of the problem for you. You will not see him again. And so I went home, and I called this guy. Well, I called him before I left work. I called him at his house. He's a nice guy, you know, really had no indication there'd be a problem with this. I said, why don't you come to my house and meet me in the living room? And I asked Colleen to get the kids and everybody else. So I'm going to be a while on this. So I relayed to him what had happened. And I said, I want your resignation. And he said, I'm not resigning. And I said, well, I'll tell you what. Here's your choice. If you don't resign, I'm going to have a formal investigation. I'm going to march all 12 of these women, and they're all going to tell their story with you sitting there. And this is going to be a matter of a record that'll be permanent. He gave me this other resignation.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but I had stuff.
Well, I mean, that's a fascinating story. I think that go, and you know, it's true. Even you still read about it today.
Oh yeah.
It's a timeless issue in the workplace, but in railroads in particular, which is such a male culture, I imagine it must have been particularly challenging.
It was. Every place I went, I skipped over a bunch of other stories that happened prior to this, but I had issues like that all the time. I had when I was terminal superintendent Northbound, I had a girl, we were short people. I I said anybody had called me if they wanted to lay off. So this girl called. She said, I can't, I said, I can't come into work. I said, well, why can't you come into work? She said, because I can't come into work because I got raped over the weekend by one of my coworkers.
Wow.
So I said, would you come in and talk to me, please? She said, yes. So in the office walks this really very pretty young lady. She's probably 5'10",
Yeah.
and she's got a backpack on her back. And so she told me her story, and it was before Labor Day weekend, something like that. And so there's another employee, a black employee, who's discovered they both lived near Lake Harriet, and it had nothing to do over the Labor Day weekend. So they'd get together and ride their bikes around Lake Harriet. They'd go hiking together and go to a movie together. And one of the nights he came back before they went to the movie, she took him to her apartment and asked him to wait while she changed clothes to go to the movie. When she came out, her story, he grabbed her, raped her on the sofa. His story is that she came out and came on to him, was scantily clad, let her robe drop. And so, yeah, we had sex, was very consensual. So when she told me her story, I said, did you go to the police? She says, yes. I said, when? She said, well, 3 days later. And I said, what did they tell you? I said, well, they can't do anything 3 days later. So, anyway, I got 2 different stories to deal with. What do I do? So I told him that I didn't want him bidding on her shift anymore. He'd have to, a lot of opportunities, but I said bid on her shift.
Yeah.
He said, I don't want to do that. She's lying. Why should I have not work where I want to work? Well, let's be frank. I said, you're one of only a handful of blacks that work here. And if you work around here, imagine if she starts telling you. Now, I've got a promise from her that she'll never, ever tell anyone.
So where we were was that you had given this employee the option of bidding on other
Yes.
other assignments,
Right.
but outside of her jurisdiction.
So I said, look, I've got an agreement from her that she's not going to tell anybody. And I said, you got to be realistic. That if she doesn't get what she wants, you're going to have to deal with all these other people who knows what they might do and say to you. You don't want to have that happen to you. So we talked it through, and I was able to successfully talk him into not ever bidding on her job again. I called her back and told her the arrangement we had, and I said, this whole thing depends on your honesty, and that you'll never tell anybody. And I said, I will check from time to time, even if I leave here, I will check to make sure you've never told anybody.
Well, I mean, what you've described is a very personal style in the absence of formal rules and formal protocols. You just did what was right, what you made common sense, right? And that often drove you, maybe sometimes to not worry about what was in the rule book or what was a protocol, but that seems to be an approach that worked for you. Could have backfired, but it sounds like it worked.
Yeah, I know I'm a little bit off. We were in the last night.
No, I think it's relevant. I really do, and I want to get into the Working Alliance also.
I want to tell you one more story on Northtown. So, again, I got the appointment to go to Northtown with Turbo Superintendent. I hadn't been there but a month. And there was a headline in the Minneapolis Northeast Edition newspaper that said, neighbors want Burlington Northern out of town. And they quoted this one alderman 50 times in this article. So I called this alderman. And didn't get anywhere, but I agreed to appear before the community. That if he'd get them together for a town hall kind of meeting. And so I called the law department, tell them what I was doing. So they said, we're going to send an attorney with you, make sure you don't say any wrong things, So, sat there in this town hall, probably 300, 400 people showed up. Oh, they told us terrible stories about all the noise we're making and the lights, and we did, you know, they can't sleep, and one thing right after another. And some guy, after spending about an hour, said, "Burlington Northern, let's go get them." And people started coming up from the audience. They were so full of hate, you know. And it is my style. I don't run away. You know, I just walked down with a mic in my hand, you know, came off the stage, and said, "Tell me what you want to tell them." And I started pinning people off one at a time like this. And then I got them all under it. So I turned around and talked to my attorney friend. And he was gone. He never came back. So I went back up on the stage. And I promised everybody that I'd solve the problem. I said, "Give me time, but I'll solve it." And so the way I did it, I put together all our officers on the turnpike. And I said, "We're going to call on every neighbor we have up there." You know, our yard was 4 miles long. You know.
This is the New York.
New Yard.
Yeah.
Here's what we want to do. Main complaints are noise and lights. Let's see what we do. But listen carefully. Tell them you're going to solve it. And if you find a way that the lights are blinding them, we'll redirect the lights, and then you go back and make sure they're happy with it. We did that over a course of about 6 months. And a new headline came out in the Minneapolis newspaper, and it said, "Burlington Northern proves they are a good neighbor."
Wow.
And our HR department submitted this whole thing to some competition that exists in the country. We came in second place in the United States for the best PR program. PR hell was just our guys just go on them.
Interesting.
Yeah, and we only came in behind the Love Canal project.
Which had a long way to go.
Oh yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah.
But in terms of
But you know, it's interesting, I guess, they knew going in when you were building this thing that it was gonna have an impact. Did you, I mean, it sounds like there shouldn't have been any surprise, but anyhow.
it is, you know.
Once they have to live with it.
Yeah, no, that's right. And,
So-
and most of the things, most of the complaints about noise came from the dynamite that was used to, we had to cut back a big cliff.
I see.
And so that dynamite explosions every day for weeks.
But wasn't that like a one-time thing?
Yeah.
It wasn't gonna be repeated?
I know, but
You were
we'll
still
do it.
in the yard?
They're still mad.
I see.
I said, "We will stop that dynamite."
Which you had to do anyhow.
Well, which was way past.
Yeah.
No more dynamite.
So let's talk about Alliance a little bit
Yeah.
in terms of where the industry was at that moment. 1979, it's, the energy crisis is really big.
Yeah.
You know, we're not that far off from the gas lines that were surrounding every community, and where are we gonna get energy from, where are we gonna, well, you know, we're too oil dependent. Now, the Powder River Basin comes into existence or discovered, and that was really one of your big opportunities.
Yeah, and now it was always known that the coal was there, but it was so far away from the market, and the BTU, British Thermal Units, energy was so low that the coal was never competitive. But the Energy Act of 1966, amended in 68, 69, and the 70s, each amendment to the Energy Act made it more attractive. Now it got to the point that everybody wanted this low sulfur coal from Wyoming. And so we had mines opening up right and left. And we had to haul it 1,000 miles, 1,500 miles, 1,800 miles, all over the southeast and the south and the Midwest, everywhere. And we couldn't handle it all. We didn't have capacity. So we had to not only rebuild the railroad that was there, because it was a secondary railroad, it wasn't built the first class had. We had to add much more capacity, and double track, more crossovers, signaling. And we had to build 100 miles of new railroad, basically between, well, I'll call it Gillette and near Casper, place near Casper. It's two names you wouldn't recognize. Donkey Creek's one of them. But anyhow, it was a monumental task. And one of the stories I tell is that Wall Street was really down on us. And we had 2 board members that resigned in protest over this big investment that was to be made. And one of the board members went to the Wall Street Journal and the Interstate Commerce Commission saying that we were making a dumb investment. We were betting this like shareholders' money. And Lou Mink, coming down on an elevator after one of those contentious board meetings, said to one of the presidents coming in, says, Bob, you and I better be right about this Powder River Basin thing, because we're toast if we're not right. And for the first time in the history of our company, if you use the railroad's history, we had to pass a dividend. Not pay a dividend in 1974. We're out of cash.
And this is 74?
74, yeah, I'm backing up on it.
Okay, yeah.
But just to show you, the company bet the balance sheet against all of the expert opinions, against everything that Wall Street wanted us to do, what some members of the board didn't want us to do. They said it's too risky. Turned out to be a huge payoff. An excellent, excellent investment to me.
Wow. And a lot of that was coming out of your division?
All of it.
Yeah.
All of it. Yeah. So it was.
So you were building up this infrastructure that didn't exist to serve this new market or this new source of, and then transporting it over hundreds and thousands of miles.
Right. Yeah.
How long did that go on? And at the same time is when, and we're going to get into the Staggers Act at some point.
Yeah.
But that gets passed.
Yeah.
Were you involved at all in the negotiation or the coming up with the details of that legislation?
I was just an operating guy. I never heard of it before. I didn't know anything about it. So 1981, let's see, 81. Yeah, 81. I get one of those calls, we're creating these new business units, and we want you to run one of them, and it's called Piggyback. And so I later on figured out I got picked because I was just another dumb operating guy. That the guy who was picking to run business units, he wanted someone from operating and run Intermodal because it's more of an operating thing. And you want to make sure that this piggyback stuff wouldn't take business out of boxcars and put it in piggyback. Because you want to stay in boxcars. Didn't know that until much later. And so one of the kind of first day on the job kind of things, I take my...
But you were still based in Alliance?
Oh, well, yeah, now I got transferred into St. Paul.
Okay.
Remember the deal, I had 1 week to get here.
I see.
In St. Paul. And so I take my team of marketing people out to lunch. And they all ordered martinis.
They all ordered what?
Martinis.
Martinis, yeah.
I just got through firing people for 2 years, right? That's so uncomfortable. And then some of them ordered 2 martinis. Some of them decided not to go back to Alice with me because they want another drink. Oh, here we go again. So I called a couple of them in and said, you either go through treatment, you stop. You can't do it, I'll help you through treatment, you won't lose your job. But you don't do it, you'll lose your job if you just keep drinking on the job. So I got a couple people took me up on it, went through treatment, and it went good. So everybody's talking a language I don't understand. They're talking about TCF territory and this territory and that pricing thing and this pricing meeting, and it's all pre-deregulation stuff, where the government controlled everything. I couldn't participate in discussions because I don't know what they're talking about. And anyway, I started reading up on this new thing called deregulation, and before it was actually going to take effect for intermodal traffic, or back then called piggyback traffic, on February 1st, 1981, I believe it is. And I thought, oh my gosh, we ain't ready for this. And I called the guy and said, what's this mean? And so it doesn't mean hardly anything. Well, it's gotta mean something. And so I started calling people that I knew, that might know something about it. And nobody knew much of anything. Not gonna find anybody inside our own company that did. And I started doing some reading, and a couple of young guys, said, hey, there's a big opportunity here. And mandate training tax. I listened to them, and I believed them. Then I called our biggest piggyback shipper, a guy named R.C. Manning. I said, R.C., have you been reading up on deregulation, what it means for you? Yeah, he says, I have. I said, I think it's a huge opportunity for us. I said, let's get together. We got together. He says, I'll tell you what, if you'll write me a one-page contract, I will guarantee you 10 new trailer loads of business a day from Chicago to Seattle and back. And here's the price I have to have that. Now, at the present time, our price was something like $3,000 for a load coming east. And it was like $100, no, it was $3,000 coming east. I think it was almost 6,000 round trips. There we go. Well, he wanted a price of, I think, 3,000 round trip, something like that. Well, I went through the math and thought, well, hell, we don't have any business now. The prices we now have.
Right.
So what difference does it make what the price is?
Right. What was his role in the company?
He wasn't in the company. He had a third-party logistics company.
I see.
They called National Piggyback. And so, anyway, we wrote the elements of the contract that we thought we had to have in on my back porch in my home near Minneapolis. And I took it to our law department. And they said, there's no such thing as a one-page contract in our business. Let's try. And a guy by the name of Doug Babb was like the number 2 lawyer. Good guy. He worked with me on it. And he gave us a one-page contract. And so we got that approved, wrote it. Within a month, we were handling 100 trailers a day of business between Chicago and Seattle, round trip. 100.
And these would be trailers that came off of trucks or coming off of boats, or the containers.
Yeah.
And that was the big thing with Intermodal, was that obviously.
Yeah.
But it seems so obvious now, looking back at it, that was going to be the way to move freight around the country, around the world.
Yeah.
But no one saw it.
No, and no one saw it for a good 4 or 5 years. And it was the beginning of so much to start taking place. And I knew that I had to replace the people I had that working in there with people that were a little more not saddled with some of this.
So would that have happened if deregulation hadn't passed?
No.
So deregulation made it.
You couldn't write contracts into deregulation. Deregulation allowed us to write a contract. And before that, you had to go to the government to get approval for the price changes. 20 railroads would meet, and 100 people meet at Union League in Chicago to debate what the price is that we could charge in Chicago to Seattle. I gave a talk after about being on the job 6 months to the National Association of Commerce Attorneys. And that was their title, Commerce Attorney. That's all they did, was handle issues for railroads and shippers at these meetings that take place all the time about what the price ought to be and something. And And again, I'm kind of ignorant, so I'm gonna just talk a little bit. And, first question the guy had, he said, you know what you just said? You just told us to roll out of a job. You wanna know something? There were 10,000 in Minneapolis for their convention. 5 years later, there was zero. There are zero commerce attorneys left. 5 years later.
Zero, what?
Commerce lawyers.
Commerce lawyers.
Yeah.
Wow.
Zero.
Because
That's what,
they didn't need them.
that's what a dramatic change it had.
Wow.
And so I gave a lot of talks. I was asked, I kind of was getting known for shaking things up in the marketplace. And so I was getting to invitation to talk, but I'm still ignorant. I don't know much about this stuff. I talked to Union Lake Club in Chicago. I gave a talk there about all the things we're going to look at doing and what the future is with this thing called Piggyback on Burlington Northern. And a guy came up to me, who was the founder of Hub, and I forgot his name for the moment. Anyway, he came up to me afterwards and he said, you know, I didn't like anything you had to say. He said, you basically told me you don't need me. And I said, well, I need you. No, you know. Anyway, so I got to develop a relationship with him, or why he felt what I was saying was going to happen to him. So these were channels of distribution issues. How we're going to channel ourselves, place in the marketplace. And I was talking about us having our own channel. We managed ourselves all the way to the customer. And the pigback was totally third-party people. We sold to third-party people, and they brokered. There are brokers. So
So what you just described was the big change. Where you went outsourced a lot of your work.
Yeah, right, one of them. So anyway, I started putting together a team of people, and boy, I put together a super dramatic team. It was incredible. It was Bill DeWitt, who you all know, he's in charge of marketing. Mark Kane, who was just off the management training program, great analyst, he worked the numbers for us real good. Later on became, a successful operating manager in his own right. Dave Burns, who was out of the operating department as a superintendent, but he was basically our cheerleader. Ken Hepner, who was kind of my personal assistant, just wonderful strategic guy. I'm leaving out a couple people, apologizing. But anyway, this we met every morning at 8 o'clock, and we had about a 10-15 minute meeting, discuss the day's activities, how we're going to go. We developed strategic plans. We changed the name from Piggyback to Intermodal for the whole industry. The whole industry will revolve around that. We took our railroad from 8th place in volume of Piggyback in less than 1 year to number 1. I'd say 2 years. Number 1. We had more piggyback traders than anybody else did in the industry. And
was this because you ordered more trailers, or you changed your method of what was the change that produced such a dramatic?
We understood the marketplace. We understood what the right price was in the marketplace for a movement. We understood the importance of round trips on your trailer. We understood the importance of utilization. We get a lot of trips per month per trailer instead of one trip. We understood the importance of why we had to know the customer ourselves instead of the brokers knowing it. I said, keeping the information from us. We probably changed 45 things, big substantial things as to how you do this business. And I was working to get control over every aspect of Intermodal. The mechanical part, repairing them, the part of accounting for them, and we were successful at that too. So we were one integral business unit that had all the functions together. No more silos, no more negotiating. We could make the changes ourselves.
And deregulation made that possible.
No, what made that possible was a new CEO by the name of Dick Bressler, who liked the idea of business units, and he fostered it and pushed it. And set up each business unit. And most people didn't know what to do with them, or how to deal with it very well at the beginning. And neither did we. And so everybody I hired to work for me were all operating people. And the operating people had an advantage of understanding our product better than anybody else. Operating people had the advantage of execution, knowing how to execute directly without having to go through any people.
So operating people as opposed to what, engineers, or as opposed to? Yeah.
And salespeople,
I see.
marketing people. So I got on the operating department.
So the big change was an organizational change.
Yeah,
It happened to coincide with deregulation.
that's right. And knew how, and learned how to take advantage of deregulation. Learned that we didn't have to wait, we could make changes. I got feedback years later from people saying, vendors would say every time they call on another railroad, like say at the Santa Fe guy would say to them, what are they doing over there at Burlington Northern? We can't figure them out, why is their business growing so much? So it was
That must have been an exciting time.
it was a wonderful, exciting time. I mean, it was a powerful team. We're still communicate all the time,
Have you saved any of those speeches you've given? Did you?
I never wrote speeches.
Oh, you just.
I just talked.
Well, I guess after your experience of writing speeches for the CEO, you got out of that.
Yeah.
Out of that habit.
I'd have outline, so
I
I'll
see.
make sure I covered it.
Yeah. But that sounds like you were not only just internally making changes, but externally you were getting a national
Yeah.
platform.
Yes, and over here I've got a Silver Kingpin Award. You see that kingpin from a truck trailer?
Oh, yeah?
That's the top award in the Intermodal. I was given the honor of that award one year for the stuff we did that I'm talking about right now.
Because the container was developed in the 70s, wasn't it? Or was it in the 50s? In the 50s was
Yes.
the container, came out of North Carolina, remember?
Yes, yeah, by
But
truck.
yeah, trucking, McLean
Yeah.
trucking.
Yeah.
But that was in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't really catch on. It took a while.
It took a while, and containerization had already taken place well before I came on the scene. But it was pretty well restricted to Southern Pacific. Had a contract with Sealand and ran containers up and down the west coast.
Right.
And we had containers that were loaded that came east, but we did use them for domestic loads. And that's not where we were making a lot of changes. We're making changes on domestic business.
So let me just ask you, because in my notes here, I want to make sure I understand this. Bill created an expediter network, dedicating entire train sets to intermodal traffic, contrary to the previous practice of moving them in general merchandise. What is the, translate all that, what is that?
Well,
What's an expediter?
first of all, it's almost the team created it. I didn't create it.
Okay.
And expediter is a name given, a branding of short haul moves. Railroads don't like short haul moves. Short haul is anything under 500 miles. There's a huge market under 500 miles. Most of the market's under 500 miles. And we figured another way to create this product that we could be successful in it. And we did, was some of the words I've used before. Utilization, put this fixed equipment together in a round trip. Pairs between cities that are roughly 500 miles apart. Chicago, Minneapolis, Chicago, St. Louis, Chicago, Omaha, Chicago, Kansas City, Dallas, Fort Worth to Kansas City, and a big expediter network. And that fixed equipment, the locomotive and the cars all stayed together. And we negotiated a special deal with labor. At that time, there were 4 or 5 people on each crew.
Mm-hmm.
We negotiated 2 people,
Mm-hmm.
which is standard now, but we were ahead of.
And the 2 people were the engineer and the.
Yeah, the engineer and a conductor. But that was not easy though. And the vote was only carried by 1 vote. And
Within the union.
Yeah, and the union guy that helped us carry it lost his job the next time. But we created a whole bunch of new jobs that didn't exist before.
Is this a time to talk a little about safety also? Was that a part of the equation that you were coming up with to cut down on delays because of safety issues?
Well, the safety issue for us was damage to contents inside the trailers. So we wanted to make sure our trailers did not move on general merchandise trains because there's so much slack action back and forth, that they don't get switched over on because they couple too fast of a speed. So we got that successfully done. So we created a separate network of intermodal trains. When we took over, intermodal piggyback cars moved on regular trains. We created our own network.
I see.
And
So you would have a train set that would be a mix of intermodal and box cars?
well, it'd be 80 box cars with gondolas and coal cars, and maybe 10 piggyback cars
I see.
scattered through the train, back and forth.
I think later on, we'll get into this, but double stacking became more common. That's a little bit later, right?
Okay, yeah, it is later. Yeah.
Or to continue on this big change with intermodal, one of the changes was in creating the terminal services.
Mm-hmm.
What was involved there?
That was a pretty major impact. At the time I came in, we had 68, I think it was, piggyback ramps. No, it's 200 piggyback ramps around the company. And that meant that you would put one trailer load with one flat car with maybe two trailers on up against this ramp, and a truck tractor would back up to it and pull them off, one at a time. And you'd have one at every little place that might load one a year maybe, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
So we dreamed up an idea of creating these hubs, and we'd have 22 of them around the country, and those hubs would have all of our quality level of services we could provide in the hub. We had a problem in that when I took over, they were run by Teamsters, main services provided by our subsidiary Truckline, which is a Teamster organization, which meant that our cost for, say, handling a trailer between the ramp and the customer was $2 a mile. And we knew that you could get it for $1 a mile or less. And so we came up with a proposal to reduce it to these number of hubs, hire people from the trucking industry to run them because they were more truck than the way they were rail. And to, through this consolidation, close all those country ramps that we had all over the place. And so this was quite a major undertaking and a change in the railroad and the industry as far as that's concerned. And I had to make a presentation to the CEO and the president of the company. The CEO was a railroad guy from the Frisco by the name of Dick Grayson, and the president was an oil and gas man by the name of Drexel. And Drexel didn't like me. In fact, my boss didn't like me, who was Dick Grayson. He hired me for one reason, and didn't expect me to get aggressive. And I wound up, I was making my business unit more significant and important than all the other business units that were under him. Well, I was under him too, but I know I didn't get any support from him. He tried to actively get me fired. And he got, with Mr. Drexel, he got a partner to help him. Drexel thought I should be fired too. So I had this presentation now before Drexel and Bressler, and not Bressler, but Drexel and Grayson, Dick Grayson. It was supposed to be a 30-minute presentation to get their approval for the capital necessary to go forth with this project. You need capital for every location. And I was there 4 hours being grilled by them, and it was just so difficult. And neither one of them wanted to support it, but they didn't quite know how, and didn't want to say no either.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, what it finally came down to is that Grayson, the CEO, said, look, I'll tell you what, let's you and I each pick one location and give him the money for that one location and see how it works out at that one location. He said, now me, I'm gonna pick Portland. He says, because Portland is where we got competition with Union Pacific, and we'll see how they can hold up against our biggest and best competitor we have, UP. And so he looks over at Bressler, or looks over at Drexel, Walter, what do you want to pick the location? And he said, well, I don't believe that they can keep all the business that they say they can at these. Well, I'm going to pick Minneapolis, because that's the place got the most number of ramps that they manage. Like 40, 50, oh no, that many, but maybe 30 ramps are not closed in that jurisdiction. And he says, but I like the idea of hiring non-railroad people, hiring truckers, so that's why he went for it, because he didn't like the railroad, and so.
He worked for the railroad, but
He didn't like the railroad,
yeah.
No, he's only around a couple of years. So, anyway, so I came downstairs, I felt like I had failed my team. I didn't know how to break the news to them, that we only got 2, and I went up for 22.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very emotional. But my team, being my team, they celebrated. They thought it was a huge victory. They said, couldn't ask for a better outcome, because we can do this. And in my office, they immediately started firing off directions, what to do, who to do it, when to do it, how they're going to, what the timing is going to be. And we opened up and got all the construction done with Portland and Minneapolis in a matter of like 60 days. And started up, and it just way exceeded our wildest expectations. I mean, our business just grew by 15, 20% a month, just kept growing as a result of this integrated approach at the local level being run by these truckers that are outside. And so that paved the way, for us to get approval for the rest of them that we did. So we peeled them off with another couple, pick up the next 2 more. And we beat the socks off the UP at Portland. UP wound up with no business practically as a result of what we had and what we were doing there. And we outgrew our capability that we planned for very quickly on doing those things. So this is just one of many, many things we did.
Mm-hmm. But that's a big one.
It is a big one.
Yeah.
And so I want to fast forward a little bit when later on when I was in charge of marketing. There was a consultant from McKinsey & Company that came into my office one day, and he was making the rounds of his teams. We had a McKinsey team on board at the time. And he said he was going to retire. He was sort of phasing out now, and I asked him what he was going to do in retirement. So, well, I've always wanted to write a book about teamwork. And I said, oh, I love teamwork. What are you going to say about teamwork? And he said, well, I'm going to write a book about high-performing teams. And I said, well, how do you define a high-performing team? He says, I don't. He says, but I know when I see it. Why do you think you have some team stories? I said, yeah, a few have come to mind right now. So I told him one story and the second story, and I told him the Intermodal story. And he says, stop. He says, that's it. He loved the idea I was about to get fired on everything we did, and everything else. So he sent in a couple of his researchers to sit down and interview. He said, can you get the whole team together? Sure. So I got the whole team together. We'd all kind of gone our separate ways after this. And he wrote a book called Wisdom of Teams. We are the lead-off story in chapter 2 in Wisdom of Teams by John Katzenbach. And it was the #1 bestseller of business books for years and years, and is still required reading in many business schools. I was on the board of 2 business schools, board of visitors at TCU and Marquette, and that was both required reading in their MBA program. It was anyway, high performing teams. And so that was one of the things I was kind of proud
Well,
of.
I think that it's useful to remember that, yes, whenever you talk to people who have been in the industry during the period that we're talking about now, they always say, well, the Staggers Act this, the Staggers Act that. But it really comes down to people knowing how to take advantage of that. It wasn't just a piece of legislation that made it happen.
Yeah.
And it was, the story you tell, I think is really, it might have happened independent of the Staggers Act, but it's certainly,
I don't think so.
no,
No.
because that opened up the innovation.
Yeah, it opened up the idea of innovating. You don't have to run to the government for permission to do anything. It allowed the mindset to be changed inside the railroads of who's going to make decisions, because now you have a knowledge set that's required to be successful. It's rendered irrelevant on one day in February of 1980, 81. So, and interestingly enough, and I thought a lot about this, but I haven't been able to really make the connection in a way that is believable. But other things started changing the company with deregulation, innovation from the engineering department, innovation from the purchasing department, innovation in the accounting department. All of a sudden, we had an entire company that's innovating like they could not and did not do under regulation. And we led the way, in Intermodal, and really got a lot of attention in the company. In 1987, I can't remember the year, but I remember the month. It was October of '87. There are 3 trade magazines that covers the industry: Railway Age, Progressive Railroad, Modern Railroads. That month, all 3 railroads had us on the cover.
Wow.
And all had different stories about the progressive, innovative railroad. In fact, in Intermodal, we had written on all our trailers, innovative intermodal service. We use the word innovative. And the head of our engineering department, Bill Glavin, he'd go to Europe and see what the best technology was they were using in Europe for switches for track, for example, or anything they were doing. He'd bring it back. And and the best of the things he'd find, we'd incorporate it right away in our company. I mean, I can tell you story after story after story after story that occurred this way, that improved our safety, improved our performance, improved our profitability, and there was a great pride in our company. And then we had, in the middle of all this, we got a new CEO, a new president, that took Drexel's place by the name of Darius Gaskins. Best guy I ever worked for.
Who was that?
Darius Gaskins.
Darius Gaskins. Okay.
He worked for Jimmy Carter, and he executed the deregulation he's an economist.
Yeah.
That the economists came up with. He deregulated the trucking industry, the airline industry, the railroad industry. So he got hired in that company because Bresser said, if this guy deregulated, he's a guy who understands. He's why I never lost my job. Is because now Dick Gleason reported to him.
I see.
And I remember one time Gleason called all of us business unit leaders into his office. And he said, guys, we got this new guy here, Gaskins. We all got to stick together. He says, he's dangerous. This guy is going to be hard to deal with. And so we all had to make a presentation to Gaskins. And I remember my first presentation to him. I went in there and I had an agenda for him, and I had a slideshow. This is back in these slides.
Yes.
Going to show him. And he said, okay, I had this agenda. Only talk to me about the last 2 items and forget those slides. I mean, bang, bang, bang. Question. I walked out there, whoa, I had an hour meeting with him in 10 minutes. But I said, I like this guy. And so Gaskins and I never talked directly much, because he was busy getting himself established and everything. And a guy that I used to ride to work with, Gerald Diggs, head up another business unit, and he said, Greenwood, Gleason's going to fire you because you're not being cooperative on fending off Gaskins. I said, hey, There's gonna be a battle there, I know whose side I wanna be on. So I wound up, one day, Gleason called, Dries Gasson called me into his office. And he said, I've been watching you, I like the way you work. And he said, I just got promoted. I've been promoted to president of the company, and I want to make you executive vice president of marketing over all the business units. And I hesitate to tell this story because I don't tell it.
Yeah, tell us.
So he said, okay, here's a quick question for you. What are you going to do about Dick Gleason? Oh my gosh, this is a test. I'll be honest. I said, I'm going to fire him. He's the right answer. He said, but I'll do it for you. And so that began, just a massive, wonderful change that took place in marketing that I was able to do. And he gave me. He said, here are 3 things I didn't get accomplished when I ran marketing, and that I want you to do. And one of them on the list was, our grain pricing is never right. When the demand is up, our prices are down. When the demand is down, our prices are up. He said, I want you to find a way to make our grain marketing in sync with the actual grain market, how it works. And so I walked out of his house, how do I do this? I don't know anything about this stuff. And so I decided that I needed to hire somebody from the grain industry to help me. But how do I bring him into the company in a way that he doesn't lose all effectiveness? So I found a guy, the human resources found him for me, by the name of Richard Carter. He was the head of the worldwide wheat trading organization for Continental Grain Company. And I brought him in at a very high secret salary to be the assistant to the head of the grain business unit at the time. And nobody knew except Dries and me and him what the deal was. And we'd meet with him once a week, or I'd meet with him once a week, after business hours. Progress, what's going on, what do you see? Because we gave him 1 year. In 1 year, he's going to take over. And so then I'd keep Dries informed. And after about 6 months, Dries called me in the office and says, you've got 1 week to put Richard in charge of grain business unit. Dries, I'm not ready. He says, yes, you are, you're ready. So anyway, I got Richard together, and one morning, all the grain business people came to work, and half of them were without a job, and the other half had different jobs. And then we brought in 2 more people from Continental Grain Company, Phil Weaver and third guy, his name slips in mind at the moment. Wow, did we ever make a difference? They came up with a thing called COTS, Certificate of Transportation. And they basically designed a program where, through the Minneapolis Grain Exchange, we would auction off our transportation capacity up to 6 months ahead of time. And the market would bid on it, just like they bid on the grain futures they were buying. And then that established what the value was of our transportation, and had it in sync with the market. That was just one change. We made many more changes. We improved our grain business was not making enough money to be reinvested. Now all of a sudden it's the most profitable business in the company. And through that and a number of other changes. Just one more quick story on this gassing. So one day, during the harvest season, we had to lease in a whole bunch of cars, thousands of more cars. And we were paying real high rates on these cars. We were paying like, I think it was like $1,000 a month, $1,200 a month per car. And so we were wrestling with how to get that rate down, because we didn't figure that was the market rate, it was too high. So it was Richard and myself, Phil, and all the other guys talking this over. And Dries Gasson was a walking around CEO. He walks in, what are you guys talking about? So he tells me. He listens back with he says, do a Dutch auction. Huh? Do a Dutch auction. What's a Dutch auction? So he describes his Dutch auction to us. So we decide that we're now going to go to the market and we're going to say, here's the number of cars that we want to have. Maybe we want 10,000 more cars in the month of September, the month of October. What do you want to bid to us on what we'll pay you for those cars? And it turned out the market price was $300 a month, not $1,200 a month. That's what we paid for them. I mean, it just brought, things like that brought our costs way down. And then we created these shuttle trains, where instead of shipping 10 cars or 1 car, maybe 20 at most, we now send 100 cars. And you had a much lower rate. All of a sudden, grain companies were wanting to build these shuttle tracks that could hold them a mile long. Because it would focus all the business on fewer grain elevators.
I see.
And the unit trains are so much more efficient, more profitable. So we did that. And one day I'm in New York at a formal railroad function, shippers function that's held every year. Black tie. I'm up on the dais, and there's probably 50 of us on the dais. It's a big deal. Probably 1,000 of it, you know. Guy sitting next to me, you know, who I had not met before, he looks around, my name tag, you know, in front of me, place tag says, Greenwood, Burlington, Northern. USOBs, this guy was from General Electric, he was the president of General Electric's transportation division. And he said, USOBs, you ruined the pricing on the grain market. You ruined it. I said, no, we didn't. The market said that's what the value was. Oh, he was angry.
Now, you also had some opposition from the grain companies, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, I forgot that story. Cargill did not like it. So they flew down, they put together a plane load of people and flew down to Fort Worth. And there were all the presidents of all their divisions. And they came in, sat down across from us, it was me and Darius and Rich Carter. And they informed us, we're your largest customer you have. It's true. They were the biggest customer in anything. And so we don't like what you're doing. So we're telling you to stop doing it. And Darius said, we're not going to stop doing it. He says, you're only paying the price that's required to pay by what the market says is your value. He says, our business is packaging your transportation and grain marketing together and arbitraging. Get out of our business. And Darius blew a cork. And he came up out of his chair and said, you don't tell me to get out of your business. And if you follow up with what you say you're going to do, I'm going to get into your business. I will buy every country elevator I can around Cargill, and we'll underbid you on everything.
Wow.
So if you want to battle, I'll take you on.
Do you remember who it was from Cargill? Was it McMillan? Was it one of the McMillans?
No, it wasn't McMillan.
Oh.
But they had, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
They had the titles. And
Wow.
Cargill said, all right, we're gonna retaliate against you guys. Just have at it. They went back, and 3 months later, they gave up retaliating. And they wound up being our biggest user of the certificate transportation thing. And made hay with it.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow. That's quite a change.
Oh, I mean, I got a lot of stories like that.
Well, I would want to hear as many as you can, but by that time you were in Fort Worth. So we didn't talk about the move from St. Paul to Fort Worth. Was there anything else because in my notes here I have about going to AC locomotives. Was that after you moved when you came here?
Okay.
So Fort Worth at that point, I mean in St. Paul, the merger with Santa Fe hadn't occurred, right?
No, that occurred after I retired.
Oh, okay, so that occurred in the 90s.
Yeah, it did.
So what was the reason to move to Fort Worth? Why was the...
Okay. Walter Drexel, who I've talked about before,
Yes.
didn't like the railroad. And I was with him on his first day on the railroad, which was April 1, 1983, I think. Anyway, we were on a back of a train, and then we got an announcement there was gonna be a derailment ahead. We had to detour or another route, and I had UPS customers. UPS was a customer on the train also. There was an opportunity for Drexel to meet them and everything. And with everything go wrong went wrong, and he thought this was the stupidest company he ever had anything to do with. Just on and on about a dumb railroad. Can't run a simple train, you know. He didn't know anything about trains. So, anyhow, that's the start. And I'm in his office after the trip in St. Paul. And he says, look at that window. Look at it. Well, you know, in Minnesota in April, the ice is still on the lake.
Yeah.
The snow's dirty.
Yeah.
The sky's cloudy. It's not very pretty. Who wants to live in this hellhole? So he called his boss, Dick Bresser in Seattle, and said, I don't like it here. You might as well move the headquarters. And Bresser said, well, I don't like the politics of Minnesota either. Go ahead and move it.
This was in
83.
in 83.
So in 84, out of all the locations that the search team came up with, they came up with a file 4 or 5 were Denver, Seattle, Chicago, Lincoln, Nebraska. And that was it. Drexel looks at the list and he said, I don't see Texas on here. Well, no, sir, we don't have a secondary line in Texas. Our main line doesn't go there. I want Texas on this list. So, Dallas Fort Worth got put on the list. We wound up in his fraternity brother's office building.
So it's purely a personal thing.
Absolutely.
Not a strategic,
Right.
not a strategic business.
Right.
What was it when you mentioned didn't like the politics in Minnesota? Was that a labor issue? Was it?
No,
what was the
Rudy
politics?
Perpich was the governor,
Yeah.
and he attacked businesses publicly all the time.
Mm-hmm.
3M Company moved their imaging business out of Minnesota for Austin, Texas, for that reason, because of an angry Perpich against 3M.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Dick Bresser, who is now in Seattle, had a terrible exchange with Perpich, and he was very agreeable to moving the headquarters.
So Burlington Northern was based in Seattle. Was that the?
The holding company was in Seattle.
Oh, okay.
But the revenue was in St. Paul.
Ah. So in 1984, you moved to Fort Worth.
That's right, moved to Fort Worth, and at that time I came down here, I was
VP of marketing.
marketing, I think, executive VP of marketing.
Mm-hmm. So then the shift to AC locomotives occurred during that time when you moved here.
Yeah, that occurred in about 92, I think.
Oh, okay. So it was later.
92 was when I was chief operating officer that happened. Yeah.
So what were some of the issues once you came here that, the certificates of transportation occurred here?
That occurred here, yeah.
What were some of the other issues that confronted you here? Was the remoteness from the lines an issue with that?
No, we figured it out.
Yeah.
I took over marketing, I inherited about 500 salespeople, I think, and a few hundred marketing people.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the sales organization, they both reported to me, but marketing, sales, and I didn't like reporting separately. No, I wanted them to be integrated.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted the salespeople to be integrated with the business units. And so, working with my team, we created an idea for a draft. And on one Saturday morning, the business unit heads all came in. And we put all 500 salespeople up on the board and had an NFL style draft.
Huh.
Worked the same way.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was real interesting because the top 10% of the people everybody wanted the same one. The bottom 10% nobody wanted.
Right.
So we were able to reduce the size of the sales department by about 50 people because nobody wanted them. And so, it was an easy way to make that decision.
Yeah.
And wound up with a much more effective organization with two of them together. So that's one of them right there.
By merging sales and marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, again, in retrospect,
Mm-hmm.
because you need that kind of cross fertilization. You know, going back to this idea of unleashing innovation, did it also involve diversifying the workforce in terms of younger people, more women, more, you know, was that also part of the culture of innovation that you were open to? Because the workforce is changing a lot in America at that point.
Sure, and it was a kind of a parallel effort on the part of HR,
Yeah.
creating those kind of goals. One thing that worked well for us, one of our predecessor companies had hired people into the training program since like 1945, something like that. And we continued that to where we were hiring 50 people out of colleges every year into our training program. So we always had this continual influx of new people, younger people, and the ratio of male to female was about half and half. And so it was, you know, part of our own. We had our own affirmative action programs before they were imposed on us in terms of what to do. And
who were some of the, were there any women who came up in that time who rose through the ranks and became leaders in the industry that you know, that you remember? Well, I don't know if Lisa Stabler was, she was based in...
After me.
After you, okay.
Yeah. There's one, and I can't remember her name now. I just learned the other day, she got a very significant position in another company in their industry. She left us and she's from Montana. Started work on the section gang and during her college years in the summertime.
Huh.
I liked her a lot. Your name almost came to me.
That's all right.
Yeah.
We'll get it.
And she headed up one of the business units for me.
Is she still in the industry now?
No, she's outside the industry. A lot of them rose up to what I would call low senior level positions. You know, when I retired from the railroad.
I see.
You know, so.
Well, let's talk about the locomotives then, because I'd like to know a little bit more about why that change and why it was so significant.
Well, Ed Bauer was our chief mechanical officer, and Ed also traveled around the world along with his cohort in charge of engineering to benchmark to see what's going on. And when Ed was at Alliance, when I was at Alliance, Ed ran the diesel shop at Alliance, and I was running the division. So he and I worked side by side quite a bit. And he came back with this idea one time of using AC traction and incorporate it into freight locomotives. And incorporated some other changes. So he sat down with the two builders of locomotives, GE and EMD. EMD is at General Motors at that time. And said, here's what we want. We want AC traction. We want radio axle controlled trucks where the axles moved independent of one another. And we want microprocessor control of all this, of the locomotive. Well, one new generation locomotive had these three things. Went to both builders and threatened each builder that we're going to order 1,000 locomotives, and whichever one goes this way will get the order. And GE said, no. Says, we are the experts on electricity, and you can't do that. And Electromotive agreed to do it. And so, it took a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, a lot of testing at Pueblo. And I was out of Pueblo for some of the testing. And the advantage of the AC is that you could move at a slow rate of speed, say 1 mile an hour, and it won't burn up the traction motor. Whereas a DC motor will start burning up anything under 9 miles an hour. And so that's not one problem. The other thing is that it could creep, you know, and the amount of electricity going into it doesn't surge. Third thing is that you can get more power into an AC motor in the same space. We had a space limitation on the axle of the diesel locomotive. And if you go to AC, you can use more of the space for the traction motor itself. So you get more horsepower that way.
So again, sounds like there's no downside to it. What was the downside? Why hadn't it been adopted before?
Well, to quote one CEO who told me, he'll remain unnamed, I never do things first. He said, I want someone else to do things first, get all the bugs out, and maybe I'll do it second, third for sure. So there's a lot of that.
Yeah, I see.
And
no one wanting to take the first step.
yeah, I'll talk about another one, for example. Let's take continuous welded rail, which I believe is among the top 3 or 4 technological changes in the industry that made the industry far more efficient. You know, one of them is going from steam to diesel. Huge jump in efficiency. Going from continuous welded rail to going from jointed rail, a joint every 39 feet with an angle bar and 6 bolts to keep the rail together, and with a bumpy, clay,
Right.
which wears the wheels out, wears the rail out, and that didn't really catch on strong until let's say the 70s, and then really strong by the 80s. And yet, the first continuous welded rail was installed by a streetcar line back east in 1917. And there were different railroads that have stretches of it, but they didn't adopt it. It just took forever for people to understand.
So how long would a continuous rail be? It could be miles, or it could be
miles and miles and miles and miles.
Without a break.
Yeah, because the factory would weld them up in quarter-mile sections, and then you take them out and put them in the field, and then you weld the quarter-mile sections up in the field.
Who would be the suppliers for that? Which steel companies?
I can't speak currently for today. It used to be Colorado Fuel and Iron. A lot came from Japan. Bethlehem provided it.
I see. Yeah.
But I would guess it all comes from Japan now.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure.
No, because that was the whole, the growth of the steel industry was railroads, so making railroads possible. And producing rail was what most of them did, as well as locomotives and other things.
Sure.
But that would seem to be a big part of their business if the shifts started to come on. That's right at the time that the U.S. steel companies were really going under.
That's right.
Or shrinking in size.
Yeah, no, that's right.
They were not innovating.
Right.
To keep up with the international competition.
We had a wonderful innovative spirit in our company. It came to an end eventually, but it was really strong.
So you and I talked earlier before we started. One of the biggest crises in the industry, and it was really a crisis around the country, was the flood of 1993.
Oh yes.
Can you walk us through that? What happened then, and how it affected the company and you and everything else?
Well, it was a major flood. Probably the worst one up to that time. I think maybe this year's even worse. But we paralleled the Missouri River for a great distance, all the way from Omaha to basically to Kansas City, near Kansas City. And we parallel the Mississippi River at a number of locations. And then we have tributaries to those rivers that we parallel. Remember, when railroads were constructed, they were where the least grade was, which is river bottoms. And so we had miles and miles of railroad we lost. And we had
in that flood.
Yeah, in that flood. And I'll give you one segment, for example. Pacific Junction, Iowa. The approach to the Mississippi on the east side of the Mississippi is a fill that goes across probably 4 or 5 miles of floodplain. And we're built up considerably above the floodplain. And we lost our railroad there because the approaches got flooded out by the running water of the river. So we had to fill that, and then we had to start building the railroad back up. And the more the water rose, the more we'd come back in with ballast cars and put down another 6 to 8 inches to a foot of ballast. And we kept raising it to stay above the floodwater, and until it quits coming up. So we had to do that at dozens and dozens and dozens of locations. And then when the water went down, we went into permanent repairs and some of that stuff. But we also rebuilt culverts, rebuilt bridges to prevent it from happening again.
Did this flood, what was the impact on the company internally? What was the...
It meant that you couldn't provide service worth a darn to your customers. It meant that your utilization on your locomotives and your equipment goes way down because they have to go longer routes, more delays, or tied up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's drastic.
And was that a turning point for you in how you operated within the company? Was it...
No, I was chief operating officer at the time.
I see.
And, you know, the higher you go, the less you have
To do with the daily, the day-to-day.
You're dealing more with strategy and things like that. And
Yeah.
so,
Who was CEO at that time? Who was...
93, that would have been Gerald Grinstein, Jerry Grinstein.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. So that was a major event, and that was before the merger though, right?
Yes.
Did that event precipitate the merger, or was
No.
that already in the works?
No. Every railroad in the West was having the same trouble, to varying degrees, but they had to deal with it anyway.
So how many Class 1s were there, or when did that idea of Class 1s come into, when was the first Class 1 family?
I don't know, but I'm guessing 100 years ago.
Oh, okay, so they
So
were...
the American Association of Railroads
Has a lot.
came up with an idea of how to classify railroads in terms of their size, and I think it's a revenue thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like your railroad at a certain
Yeah.
certain level, you go up a class. So, and the number of Class 1s has declined because of the mergers.
Yeah. Well, you know, coming from where I sit in the museum business and historic preservation, we always think of the railroads as, you know, abandoning lines or abandoning old stations, you know, and so the idea of preserving some of that history really started to become more visible in the 80s and 90s. But from where you were sitting, it was an efficiency issue.
Because the government wouldn't let us abandon anything, and so we had to maintain these lines that had no business on them, and lose a lot of money. Once deregulation and the 4R Act that came out at the same time gave us the right to make our own decisions. That just made a huge difference. So we got rid of thousands of miles of railroad, and short-lined a bunch of it, and that means that we take one particular line, put it up for bid, anybody want to bid on this? So there's a whole new industry that emerged called short-line railroads, and a lot of them are very successful.
Yeah.
Very successful.
Just looking back, you've talked a lot about people you admired within Burlington. Were there other leaders that you interacted with during the course of your career that you think were really outstanding from other railroads or related industries?
Yeah, you know, of course, Blue Bank was from our own railroad. I think he was unquestionably the leader of the railroad industry for years. He was the head of our company.
And he's in the Hall of Fame.
Yes,
He's inducted in the Hall of Fame.
yes, and I'm trying to think of any other comment. Jim Hagan, I like Jim Hagan a lot. He was...
Where was he from? Which?
Conrail. Yeah. I knew him when we were both in marketing.
I see.
Yeah. Jim's a good guy. Right off the top of my head, I can't think of something. There's somebody out there.
Yeah. But I'm just thinking, you know, when you guys are sitting around the office saying, you know, I just was at a meeting with so-and-so, or I'm watching this how this other company operates. Why can't, you know, we can't, you were always you felt you were always the standard.
Right. Well, I will give you one.
Yeah.
Mike Walsh on Union Pacific. Unfortunately, he had a tragic death. Died prematurely. I liked him a lot. I watched him, talked to him a lot. I mean, here he is, we were fierce competitors. but he was on the go, and I thought he was going to make Union Pacific a formidable competitor, but he died. It didn't happen. So, but he was one.
I'm just going to take a little pause here because I want to shift into some of the things that you've been involved with since retiring.
Okay.
But is there anything else that we want to? Okay, we're going good.
All right.
Talk a little bit about your consulting work since retiring from BNSF.
Well, I didn't do much consulting on my own, but I did create an umbrella, consulting umbrella, under which people who were leaving Burlington Northern could use to launch themselves into something else.
Mm-hmm.
And I set up an office in one of the tower buildings downtown Fort Worth to allow those people to use my umbrella, our phone numbers, and office space, and everything else to help these people. And I do some consulting on my own. That wasn't my real forte I was interested in, but oddly enough, Union Pacific hired me a couple times. One was to represent them on a cold case, that was going before a jury trial in Arkansas somewhere. I did that, but most of my time afterwards was I got active in going on boards for other companies. In time, I was on 13 different boards.
Wow.
And I love board work. I like board work because I can make a difference. And I was real strong on covenants. Such things as the CEO and the chairman of the board should be separate positions, not one position occupied by the CEO. And I believe that the CEO should not be in charge of naming committee heads. That should be the independent head of the board does that. And as such, it was contentious a lot of times. But on two boards I was on, I had a fellow board member by the name of Ellen Shapiro, who's head of the economics finance department at USC, and we plotted together all the time how we were going to make this a better company, make sure the covenants were followed. And
So there's good governance.
good governance,
Yeah.
really good governance.
Yeah.
And it was I was on two boards who were in the oil and gas business, three in the oil and gas business. Loved the oil and gas business. Reminded me a lot of the railroads. Had their own culture, their own language. They were passionate about the business. They're out there doing big things, heavy stuff. It was fun business.
Yeah.
And I was on boards of transportation companies, that brokerage firms, and leasing company, a number of different ones. And almost all the boards I was on were on companies that were distressed when I went to the board, and then we built the company back up, and then we sold the company.
For example, what would be one?
Well, one would be Francisco leasing company out of San Francisco. And we sold them ultimately to Trinity in Dallas. And
where you and I went
yes, that's
for
right.
a visit, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And another one was Remington with Box Energy. We made it, then turned into Remington Oil and Gas, and then we sold it to a company for quite a huge profit, in terms of our. I took all my pay always in stock.
Yeah.
And so when the stock's selling for $1.50 or $2 on the Wall Street Exchange, and later on you sell the company for $12, $15, $25, whatever the case might be. It's a nice fun exercise.
Yes. Yeah.
No.
It's also occurs to me that as during this time when your career you're having all this success, and also the industry is changing so much, from the point of view of the public, the image of the railroads was antiquarian. You know,
Right.
that it was your grandfather's
Right.
day age. So how did you? And also museums are more and more transportation museums are growing. I know you've been involved in those.
Right.
So do you see a contradiction there, an irony, I guess, that as actually the industry was modernizing and becoming more, and when you go to some of these conventions like I have with the railroad supply, the exchange, and some of these incredible new technologies that are being introduced, it must seem ironic to you that as people, that they have a totally different perception.
The industry is very, very safe. I mean, compared to what it was when I started down the road, it's just been a gradual improvement year after year, and it's still improving all the time. That's because understanding the importance of safety and how to manage it, but also in technology. I mean, technology has helped make it much safer. And what the industry has never done a good job on is putting the right face out there in the public, because they don't allocate enough money or resources to making this happen. And it's important. And my contention is you do it at the local level, is that you have some way to manage it better at the local level about what it is that you do. Because if you're gonna have an oil train derail somewhere, it's gonna be out in the middle of nowhere, and it's gonna be, you know, the highlight that'll make all the news.
Yeah.
And there's just, it's almost like every one's another Valdez incident in terms of the impact that occurs. And it's one of the reasons why I'm interested in Dash Railroad Hall of Fame. You know,
I was going to say, is that
great story to tell about the importance of the industry, how much it's done for the country, how much it's still doing for the country, and what it's going to do in the future. And there's a great story to be told. That it's my hope that the industry will latch onto this and make it happen.
And you're still involved with the Mendota Museum,
Yes.
right? Why do you do that?
Well, when I retired, my stepfather at the time was a wealthy man, and he wanted to build a new library in the community. And in exchange, he wanted the old Carnegie building to be a history museum dedicated to the life of his son, who died prematurely. And so he called me on the phone and asked me if I would come back. He said, I'm 96 now and I can't hold meetings like I used to. And would you hold some meetings and get support for something like that? I go, well, I came back, I held some meetings. And I said, this is much bigger. And can be made much bigger. And so ultimately, I hired Ken Hepner, who is now consulting. He's a guy that worked for me in Intermodal.
I see.
Ken, come in, I want you to build a business plan for 3 museums. This community is about railroads, it's about agriculture, and it's about the life of the people that live here, local history. I think we should have a museum for each one of those 3. And so I of course, updated my stepfather on all this stuff, and he liked it all. So he donated another $500,000 to rededicate, restore the Carnegie building to its original luster, and another $250,000 to help restore the train depot to what it should be. And so it's kind of like, what do they say, a little bit pregnant. I couldn't get out. I got so far I didn't get it started.
Yeah.
I was stuck. But I'm not saying that critically, because I really enjoyed it a lot. And so now I've got a very successful organization. We've had lots of gifting. We've raised lots of money. All 3 are running very nicely.
Is it an attraction? Is it a tourist attraction?
Tourist attraction to some degree.
Yeah. But it's mostly for the people.
Yeah, for the people in the area.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have the largest wild-bill hickok collection in the country in the Hume Carnegie Museum, because that's where the area he's from originally.
Oh.
And I think we got over 1,000 artifacts is there. And Agriculture Museum got the usual all kinds of recycled different kinds of equipment for it. And same with the Railroad Museum, we got we got a steam engine. Oh, that was a mess, political mess. But to get that, That steam engine was located in Ottawa, Illinois, in a small park that basically was controlled by one guy. And it was the closest steam engine we could have, because every railroad museum you gotta have a steam engine. So I went down and talked to him, said that we'd like to have that steam engine. We'll keep it with the cell kind, but we'll take care of one day or another. He didn't like the idea very well. But at some point he said, go ahead and do it. So we went in to do it, and he got a court injunction order against us for doing it. So now we're in the court battle with him. You know, and it took $25,000 legal cost to win that one. And he moved a wheel in on that engine. We got the engine moved, and then of course I got located in Mendota. And my phone rang one day, it was Matt Rose on the telephone, the CEO of BNSF. He says, say I have Jerry, Speaker of the House, I forget his last name now. You know, I had the Speaker of the House, who's from Yorkville, Illinois. And we're just going through Mendota on my business car with him. And he said, see that engine over there? So that cost me a lot of problems. He said, letter writing coming from both sides of the story.
Wow. Wow.
And,
This was Speaker of the Illinois House.
yeah, no, Congress, U.S. Congress.
Oh.
I forgot his last name. He was before, so we're talking probably in the late 90s, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
It wasn't Newt. Newt was gone by then.
It was after Newt.
Yeah, okay.
Kind of went after Newt.
Yeah. There was one guy very briefly was in there.
No, he wasn't brief.
Yeah.
He'd been a gym instructor before he was a.
Oh, I know him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He was from Illinois.
Yeah, from Yorkville.
Yeah.
He's in jail now.
Yeah.
I know.
Haskins or.
I know.
Well, anyhow, I know him.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
And so, but you know, since we've had one benefactor just left us a big farm, you know, with a unit income off that.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Hughes left us a couple warehouses that we get the income off of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite a story.
Yeah.
Denny Haster.
Yeah, Denny Haster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you a couple of other questions about, first of all, this house. Since when did you build this? And it has a strong railroad theme to it. But,
Sure.
When did you and what was the background there?
Well, I always promised Colleen that when I retired, we'd get to have her house that she dreamed about. And so when I retired in 1994, she said, where's my house? Because we moved 14 times, you know, and I always picked the house because I didn't have time for us to look for one.
Yeah, right.
And so, anyway, we hired an architect, hired a builder in early 96, early 95, and started drawing this house out. And it was me talking, and Colleen talking, and the architect talking. And I went in there and I said, 5,000 square foot house, gave him a budget I had. And at the end of the first session, he says, you're up to 9,000 feet. And he said, well, next we'll start cutting back. So I said, no, let's not cut back. Let's just keep going, and then we'll cut back when we get done. Just see. Every time we meet, you know, we'd add something, make something bigger, longer, something else we'd think of. We'd see something, you know, at another house we toured one. And so we broke ground on a 14,000 square foot house in basically January of '96, and we moved in late December of '97. So it was
2 years.
two years of construction.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what's a feature of the house that you're most do you think is one of your favorites, or what you that was something you really thought was important to have?
It's a hard one to answer because so many little things. But it's fun living in a place where you know every place you look there's a story, and you know what that story is. You know, for example, we had wonderful subcontractors, and subcontractors who were the guys who did the trim work inside the house. They set up shop down what's now the living room. Master work, master. And so I got a lot of complications in the house. You know, for example, when the upstairs was framed in I said to Larry Cole, our builder, I said, Larry, the ceilings are so boring. They just look like square boxes up here. Well, I said, I could splay them up. I said, what's that? And he said, well, I just corner, we'll splay it up and give you another couple feet, because they're just in the attic there, you know. And I said, that cause any, how much that would cost me? Yeah, it says nothing. He said, just a little more labor, won't cost you more than lumber. And he says, now the trim guys might be a little, no idea how much harder their job's going to be, do the trim. So the trim guys loved it. These trim guys viewed this house as a wonderful challenge to do the trim, because every trim piece you see is 3 pieces. One day one of the trim guys comes to me and says, say, Mr. Greenwood, can we trim your closets? I said, why do you want to trim the closet? Because we've never worked in a house before they said trim the closet. I said, have at it. So they trimmed the closets, you know.
Now you have quite a library here.
Yes.
And are you a collector of any? Do you collect art or books, or what do you collect?
No, I just happen to have books that I buy for various reasons. I've got this library and study below it was designed after the one in Nashville, North Carolina.
The Biltmore?
Yeah, the Biltmore.
Uh-huh.
While the house was being built, we visited the Biltmore, and I said,
I see.
That's what I want.
Uh-huh.
And so we hired a guy from Connecticut to do all the woodwork. You see, it's all handcrafted in both the library and the study. So, and so the library has got various sections. One's for business, you know, one's for history, and so that's how I have things divided by the subject.
So it's not just railroad?
No, I have a railroad section.
Uh-huh.
It's rather sizable, but
Yeah.
it's not all railroads.
When you travel around the country, around the world, I know you've done quite a bit of travel. What railroads, do you ride the railroads when you're in
Yes.
other countries? What impresses you the most, and what's your favorite line that you recommend to people?
Well,
Some of the favorites.
I like, I like the TGF in France a lot, and I like the forgot how to pronounce it in Japanese, but the Japan bullet train railroad.
Okay.
And I like them because I like looking at the engineering because they're so smooth, and I like them because of the very intricate schedules they operate on to the exact minute,
Yeah.
not a half minute off.
Yeah.
And I know how they do it, and you know, and it's, you know, I dream about how I could have done that here in this country. Those are the things I like about it.
Yeah. Did you ever did you have counterparts in the freight industry in other countries that you got to know?
No,
No.
there's nothing anywhere in the world, maybe except Australia, that's worthwhile looking at in terms of freight. Because outside of North America, railroads aren't all that good at it.
Yeah.
And Australia.
Yeah.
Australia's okay.
I have one or two other questions, but I just want to make sure we talk about these pictures on your desk.
Oh, yeah.
Just
Yeah.
I'm gonna step over here.
Where are those
Give
people
you a
getting
chance to maybe, I don't know in what order we'll do. Oh, this is a good one. We'll start
Sure.
with this one.
Okay. This picture right here was taken last Christmas, and it's a picture of the whole family. It's all my kids, all their kids, and there's 16 of them. So,
We have 3 kids.
yeah, John, my son John is vice president and general manager of sales for a data processing company in Dallas. And my son-in-law Kevin, who's married to my daughter Kathy, he runs an engineering company's project management operation in Dallas. And my son Dell is married to my daughter Susan, lives in Billings, Montana, and he sells nearly used cars, nearly new cars, European imports, as a dealership in Billings, does that. And then I got these wonderful 8 grandchildren. 6 of my 8 grandchildren have red hair. All 3 of my kids have red hair. I had red hair. And they're all straight A students. All straight A students.
Wow.
And son John's kids are star athletes, in addition to straight A students. The oldest of my granddaughter, Natalie's 16. She wants to go to Division I basketball scholarship, so she's good enough to do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And where does she live now?
Here, there's a trophy club.
I see.
Just 5-10 minutes from here.
Ah.
Yeah.
What about, let's see, this one here? Is that your children? Yeah.
Yeah, that's my three kids. That's
Okay.
Kathy over here, and Susan here, and John right here.
Okay. And then this one.
Oh, that's just me and my grandkids, all hugging me as they should. A couple of years ago.
I see.
Yeah.
Imagine do they all sort of gather here in this house?
Yes. Yeah.
We got space for them.
We meet here. We have every other Christmas at Christmas time here, and then off Christmas we do Christmas at Thanksgiving. We got this year we're going to do it. We did last year, 2 years ago. We're going to do it again this year on Marco Island, where I've got a place on Marco Island, and so we're going to do Christmas there this Thanksgiving.
Yeah. I don't want to leave out this last picture.
Oh yeah, yeah. So Phil and I met. This is my wife as of last April 1, a year ago April 1, year and a half. We met at a Halloween party in New Orleans in 2010, and so we somehow got talking on the phone and texting in early 2011. Met her again without a mask on for the first time in about April or May of 2011. Had our first date in June of 2011, and started dating, and I dated her kind of off and on, but for the most part until I asked her to marry me a year ago, September 7. I asked her to get engaged, and she did.
Yeah.
And we finally got married last April.
That's great.
I guess it was 2016. It was in 2016 I asked her to marry me. That was it. But it took me a long time. I should have done a long time ago.
Well, I'm going to just pause for a second. Julie, you have a couple of questions?
I would like to hear Bill talk to the person who is not at all clued into the railroad industry about the importance of the enduring nature of railroads, and that steel wheel and the steel rail to the building of this country, and you mentioned a little bit ago that how important they'll be to our future, but how this industry supports this country and each of us in our lives every day.
Okay. One of the reasons why I support the National Railroad Hall of Fame so much is that I want to see something get going in the industry where they can be an opportunity for the general public to be educated about the importance of railroad to each of their lives. This is an old technology, steel wheel and steel rail. It goes back 150 years. That keeps applying new technology to this old technology. And it's efficient, and it's vital for the continued economic progress of this country. And it's that way because it knows how to keep moving freight more efficiently all the time. And everything that you have in your home practically, it came there by rail most of the way. The last mile, it came on a truck. But anything you have that's manufactured in Asia or Europe comes to America on a boat, gets on a rail car inside of a container, moving on something we call double stack, and that moves across the country to the major distribution centers in the United States, places like Salt Lake, Dallas, Chicago, Atlanta, and then goes on highway, on truck after that. The nation developed like it is now because the railroads made it possible, and it seems like every step of the way the railroads continue to play a major role, and I think they will forever.
I do have a couple of related questions, because you and I have talked about the fact that this is the 150th anniversary of the Golden Spike.
Right.
But as you've pointed out to me in past conversations, a lot of history happened before the Golden Spike that really shaped
Yes.
the country,
Right.
shaped the industry. They really started on the East Coast.
Right.
And we want to talk about that, because that gets overlooked a
Sure.
great deal.
I think that the first rail operation was around 1828, and started to develop very quickly. Little small short railroads around communities on the East Coast. And by the time you reach 1847, 1848, 20 years later, there's a network on the whole East Coast of the United States of railroads that exist, all thriving to reach Chicago and St. Louis. And they did. And they got there in the late 1840s. And then now you start around 1850, now they start building west out of Chicago and out of St. Louis to various places. Like my railroad, the Burlington Railroad, we built in 1848 from Aurora, Illinois to West Chicago. And then ran over the Northwestern into Chicago from that point. Then started building in 1853 from Chicago, from Aurora to Mendota to Galesburg and on it went. By the time you get to 1860, we were already almost to Omaha, and to Omaha in some cases. And so that's how fast it happened. And played a very key role in the Civil War and in the Union's victory.
Yeah.
So when the Transcontinental Railroad came together at Promontory Point, by that time, most of the industry in most of the country had already been developed fully. So it was the last link required that was there to bring the far western part of the United States together with the rest of the country. And it did that.
In fact, in some ways, even more than the Civil War, that accomplishment knitted the country
Yes.
together and ensured that the country would be
Very true.
together.
Yeah.
And then, you could look at the interstate highway system, it pretty much follows that.
Right.
That's those same corridors that
Right.
had already been
Exactly.
developed. So
Yeah.
it really, I always say it's the shaping technology of the 19th century, and in many ways continued to be. Although there were noticeable moments where people would say the railroad industry is dying. It wasn't dying, but it was reforming, I
Right,
guess.
reinventing itself.
Yeah.
Yep, and in all of history, commerce has always followed transportation. I mean, whether it was ocean vessel to cross one continent to the other, or one country to another, or ocean meaning river, ocean transportation meaning river transportation, and on it went. So just naturally follows the railroads developed the country because commerce followed them.
Yeah. I think that commerce and also, unfortunately, war is influenced by by road building.
Yes.
And I think of a number of important roads, not so much railroads, but roads in this country that were first military supply lines. So
Route 30, US 30
yeah.
was one of them.
Yeah. Well, Bill, I thank you so much. We can go on, I'm sure, and we can always regroup, but you've been so patient and so really informative about this, about your career and related matters. So really delighted to spend this time with you.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate very much you doing the interviewing. I feel very honored.